welcome back, everyone. This is the Radio Takeover with D Rivers Live. And guess who's here with me today, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, is the one and only Mr. Geoff Guthrie.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And let me tell you, before we get started, how I met Geoff. Again, there's a slight pit boss connection there. He was in the audience when I went to see a pit boss show. And you know how it is in the musician circle. You know, some folks in the audience like, see Geoff over there, see Geoff over there. Oh, he's very humble, but boy, can he play. Oh my gosh, can he play. And you know what, Geoff? You were so quiet and you, like they say, you were very humble. And I'm like, yeah, I'd never sing. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's just hype, whatever. Until I saw you.
Okay.
And you sat in and you blew me away the first time I saw you. And it's close to 20 years ago.
Oh, goodness. I apologize for what you had to hear.
And I can imagine if you sounded like you sounded when I first saw you, I can only imagine what you sound like now. I mean, you're very dedicated to the craft.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And yeah. I appreciate you taking your time out to do the show today. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm honored to do it. You're fantastic.
Well, thank you. Well, with any show, I know you've done 10 million of these type of interviews, but this is your time. So however long you want to speak, this is your floor. We're not going to rush you in and out in 5 minutes. It's not one of those type of interviews. If you want to break Paul Arrowood's record of 3 hours and 19 minutes, you can.
That's hard to beat.
But this is your show. So
okay.
we're just going to start out, if you don't mind, telling the audience, how you got started in this business and why music?
Why not?
There you go. That's right.
It started a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my brothers were musicians before I was even born.
Okay.
And so that had to have been some of the beginnings of it. And, I didn't really live with them maybe a year when I was like a year old or something. And at that point, they kind of got out of the house and they were out, touring around and playing early.
Right.
And continued to do so. And so I think some influence was definitely there, though, regardless. And so my initial thing was, for some reason, I started beating the pots and the pans, And so at the ripe old age of 2, my parents thought, well, he needs a drum set. So I started playing the drums when I was 2.
Okay.
And my dad built this little kind of drum riser and put it in the room, and
right.
I would put on my plastic record player and put on whichever records we had in the house, and I would play the drums to the songs on the records.
Right.
And gosh, I can't hardly even remember what all those records were, but at some point the records became the Beatles, the Stones, and things like that. And I think those were kind of hand-me-downs, kind of from my brothers. They'd drop by and say, hey, here's a record to play with. So that's how that started. And then I did, tinker around with the drums for a while, but I was a very little kid. And so I probably just did some kid stuff. And that kind of drifted away from all that. I still liked the music, but I didn't play the drums as much at some point. I was like, riding dirt bikes and stuff. And so somewhere around about age 10, I'm not even sure what happened. I just had this decision that I might be interested in the guitar. And so I had 2 brothers. And so my one brother was my drum brother, which was possibly the inspiration for the drums early. And then my other brother is the guitar songwriter guy. So, I guess I jumped from the one instrument to the other. So once I got on the guitar, the original idea was I thought, well, we were living, in Harlem, Georgia.
Mhm.
And if you've talked to Paul and some of the other guys, we lived all in the same neck of the woods.
Mhm.
And so my brothers were living in Atlanta. So the original idea was, hey, your brother can kind of show you some stuff and all that. And so as soon as I got into the guitar, like a minute, they moved. And so they moved far away to Virginia. So I didn't see him as much. So here I was with a guitar. And at some point, I had a chord book, and I just was kind of just doing it myself. And that's kind of what I did for an extremely long time. It was kind of just me. And a lot of this has a timely kind of timeline. For example, we take for granted now, 2020, if I want to learn a guitar lick, I can just get on YouTube and find it in like a minute and a half.
Right.
Whereas when I was starting, we had 3 channels on the television. People didn't have computers in the house, no YouTube, no, and for that matter, in Harlem, you couldn't even get a guitar magazine.
That's
You
right.
had to at least go to Augusta, which, again, as say a 10-year-old kid, I wasn't going to Augusta very much.
That's right.
But I did spend an awful lot of time tinkering with it because I would just kind of go to school and come home. And I had a few friends around the neighborhood, but really I spent most of my time, doing that at some point. And so that's kind of the origin of it. That's my origin story. So that's how I got started. And I played maybe, I'm going to say about 3 or 4 years like that, um, and never played with another person. I didn't know another person in town or anywhere that played. So I was just playing kind of in my room. And it wasn't that I was just trying to, not associate with people. It's just I didn't know anybody that played.
Right.
And so eventually I met somebody at school and he just walked up to me randomly uh, in the middle of between classes or something and said, mentioned something about the playing. And oh, yeah, yeah, I play. And so then we got together and then we ended up meeting some of the other guys that you're familiar with, Clint Watts, Paul Airwood, Chris Morgan, all those guys. Pretty soon after that, I met them, and we started hanging out and playing. So
Mhm.
that was a very long time ago. That would have been the very early '80s, and so that's really when it sort of kicked in because that was when I did my first, playing with people and first performance. I think the first show was the Battle of the Bands,
Mhm.
and you may have heard these stories already. I don't know, but that was the beginning of it. And so, really, essentially, I'm a self-taught person for most of the time that I've played. That changed a little later, but that was the beginning of it.
We're 9 minutes in and there's already comments, Geoff.
Uh oh,
You know a gentleman by the name of Richard Smith?
I do know Richard Smith.
Well, he said hello to
Well,
both of us.
yes. Oh, there's the comment. Okay.
So you remember
Yeah,
you playing subdivisions at the Dynasty near Regency Mall way back.
that is
Good
way back.
times.
That is way back. Yes, Richard Smith was in some of my classes like jazz band and stuff in college.
Oh,
Yeah, he's a great drummer. Yeah,
yes, he is. He sure
he's
is.
a good buddy of mine. So yeah. Oh yeah. The Dynasty, that was a long time ago.
You know what? How if you played the Dynasty, then I've probably known you a little bit longer than 20 years because that was one of my hangouts
Well,
back
I
in the
played the
day.
Dynasty many, many times. Well, we
Hmm.
basically at some point one of our groups had a house gig there.
Okay.
We played every week, and at the point that we were playing there, they had several stages set up. They had
Mm-hmm.
kind of what you would call the main stage, the larger one, and then they had the one across the room that was, not quite as big, and then they had some stuff downstairs. And we were on kind of the medium one across the room usually. And
Okay.
that would have been what Richard's talking about. So, and we were playing a lot of Rush songs and progressive music. We were trying to be ahead of the time. So,
Do you remember the pool?
I do.
Uh-huh.
And we played down there some too in different groups, and they had like a cover on the pool, and so the band would set up on top of the cover, which
Mm-hmm.
essentially made everything rumble and feedback and sound awful all the
Mm-hmm.
time. But we did do some of that as well in that area.
And I've got another comment here, but you can't see it, but I have to read it to you. It's from Tommy South. I'm pretty sure you've heard that name before.
I know Tommy well.
Tommy says the legend and Geoff Guthrie. Love y'all.
Oh, you too, Tommy. I haven't seen Tommy in a while. I haven't seen all those guys in a bit, but I've played with Tommy a bunch of times. He's sat in with the band. I've sat in with his, and he's a great buddy as well. He's a drummer, and of course plays with all our other associates.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't forgotten. It's been a while, but I haven't forgotten.
He's celebrating his 10-year anniversary with Michelle.
Amazing.
10 years.
That's amazing.
Happy anniversary, you two.
Yeah, time flies very rapidly.
It sure does. I think he made another comment here. He says, been too long, he says.
It has been too long. Well, I sort of would like to say for all my buddies out there, there's kind of an open invite to come visit. It's hard for me to get away, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never been great with traveling overall, but it's hard to get away because it's so easy to be so busy here.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially, if you get sort of in the system of kind of the Broadway scene, and I mean Nashville Broadway, not theater,
Right.
just for anybody listening. Once you kind of get in that scene, and if you've made, a positive effect on people and haven't, irritated them,
Right.
at some point, you can kind of pick and choose and play as much as you want. And, I've played a lot of gigs. I've kind of trimmed them down just because it can be really overwhelming. You know, I think back to years ago in bands playing. If we played once on a weekend or something like that. This is a different thing altogether. This is where I've got a bunch of friends that play like 10, 15 times a week.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I just can't do that. I'm too much of an old irritable geezer, and nobody could love playing more than me. I mean, I absolutely love it. But I've got some of these friends that are my young guitar playing buddies that they're playing 2 and 3 and 4 shows a day. Now, let's just go back for a second, rewind. You and I have talked about this before. It's like a 3.5 hour shift is the way the Nashville thing works. And so, for example, our most recently acquired bass player, who's fantastic, he plays our show, and then he's playing, like the other day, he was like, "Oh, I'm doing a quad today." So essentially that means he's playing 16 hours in a day. And some of these guys are doing that all the time. And I just have to pull it back. That's too much, man. For me, they can do it and just get right through it. But maybe if I was like 20 again, maybe I can. I've done some doubles and stuff before. I won't say I've never done it, but I guess what I'm getting at is this is why it's hard to leave here once you start. Because, you're getting the call, somebody saying, "Hey, so-and-so canceled. Can you come down in 30 minutes?" And I live 3.5 miles from downtown. So, really, if I'm not booked and I'm just feeling like doing it, well, I can do it. I can zip right down there, and well, I've done that a lot of times. You know, so it does become picking and choosing instead of, like I think a lot of people imagine they come to Nashville and they really struggle to get a gig.
Mm-hmm.
Like every gig, is just life threatening. They've got to take it no matter how cheap it is or if it's in the worst place. But what happens is you might do a few of those, but once you kind of get into the circle,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then you can pick and choose.
Okay.
So I literally, I confidently could say I can work as much as I want to work. Um, and I'm not just saying like, hey, I'm Joe Cool and I'm the only one that can do it. I'm just saying that all my buddies that I used to play with, if they moved here, they could be doing the same thing if they chose to do so. But it's not for everybody, you know.
I'm still getting over the part about the quad. Playing a
Man,
quad.
I am too. It just makes my head hurt thinking about it.
Wow. Tommy says he is enjoying your much deserved overdue success.
Oh, well, thank you, Tommy. I'm very grateful for the kind words. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm still just a regular dude. I'm not a rock star by any means. I've had some cool things happen for sure. This is the place where they happen. Um, it's hard. It's really hard to be here and not have something happen. To be honest, it's just because, like we were talking the other day, Nashville is like the other music meccas, except one thing is it's all bunched together.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everybody is in my backyard, and you bump into people everywhere you go, every restaurant, every grocery store. You're seeing whether it be celebrities or musicians. I mean, there's no way any given day that you could go to Walmart or Kroger and walk down the aisle and not see somebody with a guitar shirt on, and everybody you see in there, you're going, these are musicians or session players. There's no doubt in your mind. Once you see what they look like, you recognize it,
Right.
because everybody looks like they're on tour all the time, which they.
Oh, you got all kinds of comments coming in. This
Oh,
is from
great.
this one you can see. This is from Richard. He says, my favorite project ever of Jeff's was Sketchbook. Talk about live fusion, Red Lion, Joe's, etc. And who was that drummer from Atlanta? Nice.
Yes, yes. Sketchbook was our old trio that we did. We did all original stuff. Well, we may have had a couple of covers, but we did all original stuff typically, and it was all instrumental, and it was sort of in the fusion mode. You know, fusion is a funny term. Sometimes it gets confused because you know the boundaries are large. I
Mhm.
think the original way of defining that term was maybe in the 70s when they were say jazz rock. That was the part that we sort of went for, where you took the intensity of the rock, but maybe some of the sophisticated harmonies or melodies of jazz, because jazz is such a beautiful structure and just really really intense stuff. But we want to turn it up loud and hit the drums hard and you know make horrible screeching noises on the guitar, over funny chords. Um, but yeah, Sketchbook was a definite favorite of mine, and the drummer was Nick Otterina. He was a just mind blowing drummer. This guy, just outlandishly good. It's that's one in a kind. You know, he was really something. And of course, that was myself and him and Clint Watts that
Mhm.
I played with in so many projects over so many years, and we were just getting in there and blowing it out, and doing all kind of crazy fun stuff. And maybe a shameless plug that those old tunes, um, those 10 people seem to like them. So I've been working on some of that. Hopefully, I'm going to dare say by the end of the year or sooner, there should be at least a couple of tunes from that era that I can get out to the world.
Good.
I've been sort of tinkering with them, and I've been pulled aside about 5 times in my life, and sort of been told up and down, sort of like, hey, I've been waiting,
Right.
and I've been telling this story that I've quoted myself. Here's my quote: "I'm going to get something out this year if it kills me." And here's the punchline to that quote: that was spoken in the year 2000. So here we are. My progress is not much better than then, but I'm determined to get some stuff out, and I'm speaking to you through this iMac, and it's a nice computer, and it was purchased for the purpose mainly of recording and all that. So it's current and high powered, and at least it's working so far. So
Baby steps. Baby, that's
yeah,
what I
yeah. Well, the thing is, as I've told many of my friends, I've got, oh gosh, like 10,000 snippets, of parts and ideas, and I literally think I could just come up with a snippet just continually, but it's just putting it all together. And even though a lot of the really, if you would call modern or ultra modern, fantastic players are
right.
almost hidden. They're kind of underground, and you're not seeing them. But every now and then you see somebody and you're like, who is this person? Never heard of them, but they're just playing all this mind blowing stuff. And so the problem is, I see that and I say, well, I've got to live up to something. I mean, people, I think at least a few people over the years have kind of been waiting to see me do something. And so in the back of my mind, I'm saying, well, I've been practicing it for about 40 years. So I'm hoping it'll be pretty good. Um, but we'll see.
Richard says he's so looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, there's no doubt about it. When that stuff comes out, I'm going to put it everywhere. And
Well, you've got one sale right now with Richard.
all right, I'm willing to take down payments now. 100% down, no monthly payments. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people have told me this over the years. People that used to come to a lot of shows, whether it be in our old cover bands or original bands, people that just see you in passing, people that I see here now, and the one thing about being here, there's a couple of excuses that I can't make, and that is very simply, I cannot make the excuse of, well, I can't get a hold of anybody to play, because I've got a handful of bass players, drummers, keyboard players, guitar players, or if I wanted other instruments like steel, fiddle, and so on, there are just boatloads of them that all I have to do is just say, man, would you like to record something for me? They're all itching to do it. They're all itching to do everything, so, and I've made so many pals playing with all these different people, and some of them are just mind blowing, mind blowing. The other night we played a show, and we didn't have a regular drummer, and so we got to fill in, and we had this fellow, McCoy Gibbs, and McCoy is just fantastic, and thank you, McCoy, for playing with us. The vocals that night sounded like we were Queen, because his backgrounds are just amazing, and we already have good vocals already. So when it was all going, it was crazy. And he's a fantastic drummer, and he plays with Lauren Elena. which is, if you're not familiar, she's kind of a big country star. So, I mean, it's kind of like, the fill-in guys you get, somebody like that, it's hard to get that anywhere but here.
That is unbelievable.
It is to me every time it happens, and then you say, oh, well, the so-and-so's playing tonight. Well, they played with so-and-so, it's just crazy, and you're walking down the sidewalk, and I waved to Tom Killen. He's a steel player. I waved to him. Hey, Tom, how's it going? He's playing a quad. He's probably 65 years old. He played with Waylon and Willie and everybody, George Strait, and everybody that ever lived, So
Wow.
it's amazing when they're all around. They're everywhere. I could probably throw a rock out this window and hit one of them, And so again, in that case, I really have no excuse. I have people just saying, well, what are you waiting for? So I need to get it done. So some of my goals are to get some of that done. I need to get a new official website going. That's way behind the times.
Right.
I want to set up some instructional stuff on the website as well, because, on and off I've taught for almost 30 years. And so I want to really, address that idea as well. Oh God, I got too much to do.
Baby steps.
I know, that's my problem. I get overwhelmed, and then steps don't get taken. So
I know about that.
I'm trying to do it. I could learn a lot from Amanda Daughtry. I mean, she works at an incredible pace. It's like if you go on the road with her,
Mm-hmm.
you think, okay, well, I'm gonna ride in the vehicle, and just kind of mellow out. Well, yeah, I'm gonna do that. But she's on the phone and the computer, and every minute of the day, if she's not driving 15 hours straight, and so that's the hardest working person in show business that I've seen.
So she just tackles it
All the time. She books everything. She does everything. She's a working machine. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
Just makes me tired thinking about it. I'm getting tired right now. But if she were my manager, I would be a star, So
Right, there you go. Exactly.
so
Well, I'm gonna rewind back because I know the audience has a lot of questions about Nashville, and you've already tapped on some of that. But
all right.
what's on my mind about what made you become the guitarist that you are now? Who in the world are your influences?
Oh goodness, a lot.
Mhm.
For on a side note, for those who want just a quick taste of it, check out my Facebook page, because everybody nominates you to do these 10 records that influenced you or whatever. So I just did that a week or two ago. So
Okay.
that's one place if you just want to look. Normally when they do that little nominating thing, they say, no explanation, no comments, just do your album picture, and I guess they're trying to get more positive information on Facebook and not so much soapboxing. So
Right.
that's easy with me because there is no soapboxing. But I did just do that, and so I nominated a friend of mine, and so we had that discussion. So I'm going back when I get spare time, and I am putting discussion on each one,
Okay.
because I like to give the origin of what intrigued me with those recordings. Because it's cool to look at the pictures, but I think people are curious. They'd like to know what really triggered you into something. But the quick of it is, I would say my brother was probably my biggest and first influence. I got to
Okay.
give credit there. That's only fair. But my first big one was Jimi Hendrix, and still to this day, I still cherish Hendrix's whole scenario, you know, his whole vibe. He really, and some of it was timely, you know, for players now that are coming out, you know, sometimes they go back and hear like a weird bad bootleg and maybe he's a little out of tune or something,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they kind of write him off sometimes. But it's a whole different thing when he first came out, which was really before my time as well. You
Right.
know, when he first came out, though, he broke all the gates down. You know, everybody else was wearing matching outfits and kind of strumming quietly,
Mm-hmm.
and then here's this guy, kind of this wild hippie, comes out, you know, with three Marshall stacks and a Stratocaster and just like world domination, you know. And he was pulling from all these different places, as well as the crazier sounds. You know, he was pulling from jazz like Wes Montgomery and all the Motown feel, and he had all of it really legitimately, you know, happening. So he was really my first, you know, one, and so pretty soon after that, I was it kind of lit a fire, you know, and then I got in, you know, at that point we were hitting the 80s. So then it was Van Halen and I still love that. And we still, you know, throw a couple of those things into the set from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And people love it. It's now, of course, that's all retro, you know, everything is retro that I do practically, but that was another big one. But the whole ladder of my growth of listening kind of went in all different directions, um, maybe in the late 80s, because then I started getting interested more in different styles, because really up until about, I don't know, I'm just guessing, late 80s roughly,
Okay.
up until that point it was really just all about the rock. You know, it was about the rock and some of the blues, you know, because I was hearing Clapton, you know, Cream era Clapton was a huge thing for me, um, and things like that. But really, once you kind of hit the metal phase, you know, there was that, and then it started really branching out for me. I got really interested in a lot of other stuff. So it became more of the progressive music like Rush and Yes and old Genesis and that sort of thing. And then, you know, progressive rock is the gateway drug to fusion, you know, which was, you know, Chick Corea and all that sort of thing. And so, you know, all of those were influences. I've often said to people who ask that question, you know, I feel like there's a million influences, but if I had to pick three really that really just really did something for me and really influenced me, not just that I thought were great, but actually caused me to rethink or do certain things a certain way, I always have to bring up Steve Morris, Alan
Mm-hmm.
Holdsworth, and Eric Johnson. Those are kind of my three guys, you know. They kind of set a bar for me. They set a bar that can't be broken down. Still,
That's a pretty high bar. Those are very serious.
yeah, they can't do it. You know, they can't break it. Now, there's a lot of players now that can do a bunch of stuff that maybe those guys can't do or couldn't do.
Right.
Um, but no one till the end of time will actually understand, crack the code on Alan Holdsworth. You know, I feel like he is the most advanced improviser that the world has ever seen. And for a lot of people, you know, I've had a lot of friends over the years that I'm just like, I'm totally like pro Holdsworth, you know. And so I'd say, man, you've got to hear Alan, check this out. And they would hear it and it would be too far out for them, you know, and they would just say, well, that's pretty cool. I can listen to it a little bit, or I just can't get into that, man. That's too weird. But see, it really spoke to me because number one, I'm all about the tone. You know, tone is one of the first things when these guys get the guitar tone that really appeals to my ear. That is that's something that really pulls me in quickly. And so even, regardless of what they actually play, if they have that really beautiful, perfect tone, according to what I think is perfect, then it really pulls me in. And Alan, to me, had the greatest guitar. Like that lead sounds just the greatest lead tone ever, you know. And Eric Johnson as well. I mean, what a beautiful lead sound. It's just so majestic and powerful, and it's very recognizable. See, I feel like that's a shortcoming of some of what we get today. Is some of it starts to sound all the same, even though it's great. You know, you can hear the first two notes of Cliffs of Dover and go, "That's Eric Johnson." Hands down. I mean, you can't argue that fact. Anybody that's ever heard him can hear a song they weren't familiar with and go, "Yep, that's Eric." And see, I'm really into that. I love that. I love that concept. And I think the very greatest of all players usually have that.
Mhm.
Again, these are my opinions. These are things that triggered me.
Right.
You know, I think Alan was such the improviser. He was like John Coltrane and everybody all mixed together. He just had stuff that nobody can figure out really. And you can copy ideas, but nobody really could get where he was originally coming from, I don't think. You can theorize it, but he just had a whole different mindset. So he was a heavy influence. I wouldn't dare say I could play anything by him, but
Mhm.
every time I'd hear him do something, oh man, that's just blows my mind. And Eric too. Eric just had the tone, and he could kind of take you in these places where you heard some familiarity with Hendrix, Clapton, and Jeff Beck, and those are all influences. Um,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
he kind of pulled it together in his own way, and of course Steve Morris. At some point, Steve was local to Augusta, so
Yes, he was.
he was kind of he was kind of the legend that was always spoken of, even from when I was very young.
Mhm.
And I still, again, much like Alan, Steve had a thing going. I feel like nobody can write music like he writes it, because it's like he's writing with like kind of like parameters that you would have in, say, Bach pieces. You're
Mhm.
writing with classical kind of orchestration. Um, I think he used to nickname it, electric chamber music. So it was
Right.
kind of like everything was pieced together, like Bach or Mozart or Haydn, but yet it was with electric guitars and the violin and the keyboards, and everything was voiced a certain way, and it was just really incredible. And I used to always cherish the fact that he would come to Augusta all the time and play. So out of all the people that I've been to shows, I've seen Steve over 30 times. And I'm here to tell you, every one of them was mind blowing. And I bet you he didn't make two mistakes out of 35 shows, which was just unbelievable. Even the greatest players there are, slip up. But man, he's not about slipping up. He is about nailing it. And so I would say those are my biggest influences, as well as different styles like jazz and classical. Uh, mentioning Richard, when I was going to school, I was studying classical music and classical guitar, and that whole world is another whole world that
Yes, it
opens.
is.
I mean, you can spend your entire life, 15 hours a day practicing classical guitar, and you know, at the end, just say, well, I just touched on it a little bit,
Hmm.
but it's such a beautiful thing. I've always said that if you learn a little bit of that, even if you just played like five pieces, for example, you're changed forever,
Yes.
you know, and definitely one of the influences on that part was Steve Morse. I mean, I got into it before I got into him, but um, he would get up and play a rock tune and then turn around and play like a nylon string legitimate classical piece that would just totally blow your mind. I was just like, man, that is what I need to do. I need to be able to do the classical thing and the jazz thing and the rock thing and the bluegrass thing. And so, mentioning the old group sketchbook, we were trying to touch on that. We didn't really have all of the instruments we really needed, with the keyboards and all that, but that was the direction we were trying to go in. So I always love that direction. No one will ever convince me that that's not cool. You know.
I'm looking at, you got more comments here.
Oh goodness.
And this comment is from Alan Lowe.
Oh, I played with Alan Lowe for years. Yeah.
The Rockin' Rooster.
Uh,
Love this guy. Professional to the leather.
well, awesome. Yeah, I played with Alan and Augusta. Um, thank you, Alan, for the kind words, but also some really important training. Because there is very, very often in my current scenario, all of a sudden we're playing, a song, and I think, oh, I'm glad I learned that when I played with Alan Lowe. It happens all the time. Some of those '90s country things, and I chuckle when I think about it a little bit because, now when somebody says, "Hey, can you play any '90s country like so and so?" And then I think to myself, well, I was in a '90s country band, but when I was in a '90s country band, we didn't call it '90s country because you guessed it, it was the '90s. We were just in a country band.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the material pretty much was '90s or before. And
That's
so
right.
it was Alan Jackson, Travis Tritt, and all of those in that era. And so
Mhm.
a lot of that stuff crops up here. They still want to hear it.
Right.
And of course, we play Alan Jackson's Good Time Bar every Friday,
Mhm.
and that's part of the stipulation of playing that bar is you're supposed to kind of stick with that kind of material. And so when they start, requesting those songs, I think back of like, wow, I used to play that with Alan, Alan Lowe, and I think, wow, that's sure handy that I did that then, because now if I had not, I would be lost again. So
Mhm.
it was better to be lost in the '90s and figure it out, and now get back on board with it.
Very true. You know, Listening to your influences and how you started out as a drummer and then you gravitated towards guitar. What I'm hearing is all these different genres and it's all stirred into the sound that you have right now.
Well, it is, and I think the more you put in that pot, it becomes harder to define, but eventually people just seem to like it. And it's funny because I really get a hoot out of that. The more sort of undefinable it becomes, the more I'm happy with it, and I think the more other people are happy with it. Because of the fact what they do is when they can't put an exact label, when they can't say, oh, well, that is obviously licks that you took off a Thin Lizzy record or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Once they can't say that, then they have to just think, I either like it or I don't.
That's right.
And then it just becomes, if you've ever talked to somebody and they said, oh, I like any music as long as it's good. Of course, that's like the most subjective thing anyone ever said. But the point is, if you can get your style to be less definable, at least at some point, I think at some point they just have to say they like it, or they don't, you know. And that was sort of the setback with some of those bands that were my biggest influences. Anybody that didn't like the Dixie Dregs with Steve Morse, I think the only reason you could say you didn't like it was like they switched gears a lot. They play a bluegrass tune, play a rock tune, and play a classical piece. If you didn't like that kind of channel changing, and it kind of you couldn't settle in with it, well, then maybe you didn't like it. Of course,
Right.
I don't know how they couldn't. I love it. But if you kind of take that same idea, but not just put it separated, but put it together. In other words, maybe you learn bluegrass lines or bebop lines, and that finds its way into your rock tune. You know, that's the part of the fusion element that I was always attracted to, and also the part of it that was really confusing. Because when you first hear that, you're kind of saying, where did it all come from? I mean, it only take like two Chick Corea solos where
Mm-hmm.
you just throw up your hands and say, where did it come from? It's too tricky to figure. There's no way to point to one direction. It's like everything. Chick sounds like he's played everything once and mixed it together. So that's the part I love about it. But yeah, those influences are strange and wide for me. So,
Which leads up to the next question:
all right.
tone or technique?
Ah, the chicken or the egg? Here we go. Right?
That's right.
How did the chicken get here? Well, the egg. How did the egg get here? The chicken. Um, for me, I think tone is the thing. I've always had a tone obsession. I mean, I can remember, for example, this is kind of a silly thing, but I remember, whatever year it was, the Christmas that I got my first guitar. I remember I opened it up and I laid it on my lap, not holding it properly, and I just kind of did that on the strings. It wasn't even a real strum. It was just kind of flicking my hand over it. I remember hearing it and thinking, man, that sounds cool. And it was, of course, that was ridiculous, but I was just really intrigued by the sound it made, that you could trigger an object and it would create a sound. And so I think that was the beginning of the tone quest. Was like, well, now we're making a sound. Now you got to make the sound good to you. And I have often been on the tone quest. I'm still on it. And I do realize sort of now that I remember, like, for example, a friend of mine asked me one time, he said, how do you develop your own sound? How do you develop your own voice on
That's
your
right.
instrument? Um, and I had a really good answer for him, I think, um, which kind of negates some of my work. But is that you can't help it. You can't help but have your own voice. You know, Sooner or later, if you just keep tinkering around, you have your own sound. You cannot help it. Now, there's people out there that kind of make their whole scene, like so and so does a really good replication of this person.
Right.
Like if you're like, okay, I'm in a tribute band, and what I do is I sound just like so and so. I sound just like the Eagles, or I just sound just like Jimi Hendrix. I put on his outfit, and I play a strat, and I try to make it sound like that. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point in the day, you will have your own voice. And I think the tone is that. That is your voice, is the tone. And so for me, the technique is the vehicle to get to the tone. And I've studied a lot of my favorite players pretty hard, trying to figure out how they got that tone. Because there's guys that can just plug in anything. It
Mm-hmm.
makes me so angry, to be honest. They plug in any old thing, don't pay a bit of attention, and just get this amazing sound to come out of it. Classic example, one that I'm newer to in the past few years, is there's a local player here, Jack Pearson. Jack Pearson is an amazing guitar player. Um, every now and then I see him somewhere, walking down the street or something. I'll talk to him. He's very friendly, but he has an amazing tone no matter what he's playing. His influences are very wide, so I'm inspired by what he does whenever I see him. And kind of the old thing with Jack is like he plays like a Squire Stratocaster that you can buy used for $89
Right.
through a real basic amp with like one pedal. And every time Jack Pearson plays a show, there's like 100 guitar players standing in front of him staring, trying to figure out how he's doing it. He's playing the cheapest, easiest, most generic equipment and just getting these mind-blowing sounds out of it. Which again, like I say, makes me so angry I can't stand it. Uh, I've only spent like $1 million trying to get good sound. But the point being, he has developed his tone, and it's based on his technique is obviously very exacting, that he can take basically a beginner guitar and get a sound that like nobody can reproduce. That to me is special. You know, and all the players that I mentioned as influences, in my opinion, had amazing tones for what they were going for or the time period or whatever. When Hendrix came out, absolutely no one sounded like that.
Right.
When Jeff Beck came out, nobody sounds like that, and actually they still don't. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the same for all of what my opinion is of the greats. And so I've been trying to hone this tone thing down forever. And the more I buy the best pedal and the best amp and the best guitar and the best pickups and rewire everything 75 times, all of that works. But if you don't have the touch right, it's all out the window.
I was about to say, if you had all your pedals and such, everything that you own lined up, ready to play, and you turned your back and I came behind you and took all your pedals away, I truly believe that you would still kick tail.
Well, thank you, but please don't take my pedals. I'm so hooked into them now. I can't. I'm addicted to my little pedals. It's like a nervous twitch. You know. Um, the thing about that, it's all. Let's be honest. It's all a security blanket. That's all it is. Because if you go to play and you're feeling it, you're feeling
Right.
good about it, you're feeling positive for whatever reason. Maybe you're feeling like, man, our band is killer today, or I'm just in a good mood, or most importantly, you've had your Java. You know, 8,000 milligrams of caffeine will do amazing things to your playing. Um, but if you've got it all together, and like you say, maybe something wasn't hooked up right or something, you're gonna have to make do.
Right.
And as any of my bandmates probably that I've ever played with, maybe more so now than ever, they would all tell you I'm fairly dissatisfied with myself most of the time. I'm always tinkering with stuff, and I'm always just thinking, well, it's just not quite it, you know. And part of that maybe is just a mental disorder of
Right.
always trying to just hone it and polish it and perfect it and all that. And sometimes I go back and, like, for example, I'll think, hey, we played that gig, and I'll be thinking to myself, man, I couldn't get my tone tonight.
Okay.
Now, I don't say that on every single gig. Some people just have that kind of nervous thing where they just say, man, I'm just terrible. And they say it every time. That's not me. I don't do that to myself. I don't beat myself up that much. But I kind of get on the thing of like, well, I don't feel like my sound was not there tonight. And if it's not there tonight, then I feel like I didn't play as well. So then I think my playing wasn't good. And so then I go back and watch an iPhone video that somebody put on Facebook or something. And I think, man, that's actually pretty much just what I hoped it would sound like. And then I'm surprised, then I'm like, well, maybe I'm just completely nutty about it. But it also has to do with, how, like, if you've ever, well, nowadays it doesn't happen with iPhones and stuff, but, if you missed a call
Mm-hmm.
back in the day and you left your voice message on an answering machine and then you heard the message, then you said, I don't sound like that. I think it's that. We play the music, and as we're playing it, we interpret it in our brain, our ears, how we hear it as it's happening. And we're thinking, man, I'm rocking, or I'm not rocking, or whatever. And then I go back and watch the video and I think, wow, that's a little different than I had perceived. And so I think you still have to follow your tone quest. I mean, I got to do it. It'll be, on my tombstone, it'll say, I think my tone was finally okay. It'll be that. But the point being, you have to kind of make that quest for yourself. If you're really determined to get it to a certain place, I think you have to do that. And I think half of what drives me about that whole thing
Right.
is when somebody says, dude, your tone is so good. Then I just go for it even harder. So, and I know I've had too much coffee. I know. The point being, though, that the technique is the only way to get it, really. Because I've had a lot of people like sit in and play my rigs and stuff, and it's just not set for their playing.
Right.
And it
Mm-hmm.
just didn't really sound right. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, they play on their rig and sound like $1,000,000. It's just, I've got a way of doing things that really only fits for me.
That's right.
And I had a friend of mine. I've had a lot of friends of mine actually come up and say, "Hey, what are you doing to get this sound? And what does this pedal do? And all this." And so they'd go and buy the pedal. They'd come back and say, "Man, I don't like that pedal." And I would say, "Well, man, I can't live without that pedal." And I'd say it's like the secret of everything for me is that pedal. But a buddy of mine said that pedal works with your hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's what it is. It's like I'm playing to that pedal. It's like me and that pedal communicate together to get a certain sound. It's part of the recipe, and other people don't get it because they don't play that way. And I don't mean good, bad, or otherwise. I just mean not the same.
Wow.
One more sidetrack on the tone thing is I felt like a couple of really big moments in that was I heard a couple of my favorite players. Um, for example, Eric Johnson
Mm-hmm.
and Steve, mentioning those. I heard them like 2 or 3 feet away, not plugged into an amp. And people that are huge Eric Johnson fans, I mean, they go to the ends of the earth just like he does, trying to get that tone. It's like, wow, man, he's really getting that lead tone. How do you do that? And they go and buy the pedals and the amps and get it all together. But I'm here to tell you, I heard him at a guitar show right in front of me with no amplifier. You could just barely hear the electric, unplugged. And the guy was getting him a cable. And so I heard him kind of working around, and it sounded just like the sound that comes out of the amps. It had this really perfect, accurate kind of thing going that it was like, that's where the sound's coming from, right there. Because there's no amps, there's no pedals, there's not even a cable. It's just pick and fingers and frets and stuff. It was like that. That was big for me. So I've spent a lot of time working that, just sitting on the couch with nothing plugged in. For anybody searching for your tone, spend time doing that. That's a huge deal, because if you sit on the couch and play with no amp
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't sound good already, stop the show. Start over. That's where it's got to start, because I have spent thousands of dollars on pedals. It won't fix it. Trust me when I say that. It will not fix your shortcomings. They're only there to make you comfortable.
We got a lot of comments here.
Okay, well, I'm blabbering like a crazy person. Like I said, I've had my 5:45 coffee, so I'm out of control here.
These are some of the wonderful folks who have joined to check you out in the show, and some and some you don't.
Okay,
And that's all good. You got new folks.
Absolutely.
Of course, Tommy South, he joined earlier.
Yeah.
Michael Butler, who is going to be on a Wednesday, he joined. Said hello. He's a bass player.
That sounds familiar. Is he an Augusta person?
No, he's out here in California.
Oh, okay. Well, then
Bay Area. From the Bay Area. Mm-hmm.
Well, tell him a hello.
Hello.
And,
Dino Dean J.
No.
Says hello. Milena.
I know her.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Well, hello to everyone.
Joe Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Jonathan Wright joined.
Yep.
Barry Walker, he is a Southern Soul blues guitarist from the Columbia, South Carolina area. He's going to be on. I'll tell you about that one later on, but he's going to be on the show. He says hello.
Yeah, great.
And Jerry James, she joined.
Yeah.
Dave Mercer.
Right on.
Vicky Arrowwood.
Yeah, lots of familiar names.
Lester Johnson, a good friend of mine from out in the Midwest area, joined.
All right.
And Alan Lowe says he's very much enjoying the interview. Says an awesome interview, so professional on both sides. He's really enjoying this. So thank you, Alan.
Excellent. I couldn't do it without you.
And Clint Watts, he joined. He said,
"Oh well, I think I've heard of him.
A couple of times.
I've heard mention, telltale of his name. I think
at least once.
Gosh, I've known that fella for so long. He's one of my dearest friends. Played with him on and off for decades.
Mm-hmm. Good guy.
Really much love for all of you people. Anybody that's tuning in or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, Geoff. When I came up with this idea for the Legend series, I knew I had to get you on this train because you just listening to you for the last few minutes here, you're very dedicated.
Well, what else am I going to do? I don't know what else to do other than this, so I kind of go full force. And that I don't want to detour you too much, but on another side note, Nashville will bring something out of you, because and a lot of people think when they think Nashville, they think, okay, I'm going to walk down Broadway and I'm going to see, every club is going to be the best guitar player in the United States.
Right.
And that's not true. because you're going to walk by some and you're going to think that is just dreadful. That's just the way it is. But you will walk by some and you will say that is some of the best. And I've got some friends that are the best players probably the world has ever seen. And so that's something to think about. You know, you hate to have to follow that. You know, I mean, I know some guys that I've had to follow or even play on the same stage with. It's just, whoa, man, how are you going to deal with that? You know, somebody that's just so good that you think, man, if they take a solo, I can think of some buddies of mine. I'm thinking of one particular, as a matter of fact, Mike Bork. Mm-hmm. If you play a 90s country song and you let Mike Bork take a solo and then you have to follow it, mm-hmm. everybody should be prepared for a letdown because he is wicked. And he's just really killer at that. And there's a handful of them like that around here that they'll put you in your place quick. And for those that doubt it, I just say come try it and see. You know, like I said, there's some people here that you say, that's not so great. What's so great about that? That's bad, you know. Mm-hmm. But there's some great players. So anyway, the point of that is, if you're around that a lot, they inspire you to get it done. And I know, for example, with this particular band, you know, if Amanda says, hey, you know, we need to work on these two tunes, you know, we need to learn these two. She'll send out a text. Hey, everybody, take a look at these two tunes. What that means is once that has been spoken, the law has been written, that could show up anytime. And the thing is, you think, oh, I can scoot on through it, you know. No, what happens is when you get there, I know in the back of my mind, because I play with these guys every week, I know how it is. Once those terms have been spoken, that means the first time we try it, everybody is expected to nail it 100%. And so I always try to do my best work of nailing it 100%. And then if somebody else fumbles, I'm okay, you know, and it happens all the time.
You know, I got to go back on that what you just said. When Amanda sends you a song to learn,
right?
It is expected of you to learn it. There's no whining about, oh, I got to do this. Or no. If you want to stay in that project, it is expected for you to get on the ball.
It is. And she told me something one time that I took really to heart. It was a great compliment.
Right.
And she said, I don't like good. I like great. That's what I expect. Here we are. It takes a lot of work, you know, to get that done. But you can get it done as long as you know that group text, you might be hitting on that tune next week. Now, if she comes up next week and doesn't call it, well, okay, you got by another week, you know. But I always learned from experience of like, oh man, I didn't look at it and kind of fumbled it.
Right.
She doesn't like that, you know, and she's not going to just like yell at me and go crazy.
Right.
It's more of like a family disappointment, you know, like, oh, you know, that thing. And that drives you to do it, you know. It makes you really want to get it right, get it nailed down. And when I say get it right, that's the part too. Get it correct, you know. Because like there's an old joke around here that as far as songs go, right. You know, they say, here's a saying, you know, there's the right way, there's the wrong way, and there's the broad way. And see, a lot of these tunes get played in a fashion that's not like the original, but it's like somewhere along the line, all the Broadway players started playing it like that. And so we definitely do some stuff that we do our own way.
Right.
But if she says, go learn a tune, I'm going to try to do the arrangement that is correct. And so, again, it's a long answer, but it's expected. You know, I've been playing with her for about 6 years now. You know, it was expected probably the first day, you know, but now it's sort of like, we don't have to talk about that, you know.
You already know.
We
What's up.
know.
You know what's up.
You know, again, she's not going to like pull me aside and like headlock me or something about it, you know, but it's just like, yeah, you got that right, you know, sort of. You know?
It comes with that level.
It does. It does.
Of musicianship is what it is.
And it will, like I said, it'll make you feel bad if everybody else is on the page.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And it's always a fun surprise when you have somebody sit in, or you know, like a local player sit in, or somebody filling in, like one of the players couldn't make it for the gig, so you had to get a different keyboard player or something like that.
Right.
And you say, oh, well, we're going to do this song now. Do you know it? And they go, oh, yeah. And every time you say it, they go, oh, yeah, I got it. And they know the intro lick, or they know all the parts, or they know where the solos are. That's a real pleasant surprise. But it's kind of expected. You know, around here, it's kind of expected that you know, you're supposed to be a big boy now, and you're supposed to know your stuff, you know. And of course, the more you know it, and the better you sound, and the better you make the band sound, the more you can pick and choose your gigs.
That's why you get all those calls, and you are able to turn down, pick and choose.
Yeah.
Pick and choose. Pick and choose.
I love turning down. Because the reason I turned down is I got something better. Or I'm already booked, you know.
Right.
I think the most I ever did, I was going on a run there where I was playing about 10 times a week. That was the most. I can't do that. Oh, I'm tired. It's just too much, you know. It's too much playing. These old fingers are going to be rickety if I don't stop that, you know. But yeah, there's a thing, you know, there, like I said, it's like a whole system in place that nobody ever talks about. It's like unspoken, you know, the 4 commandments of Nashville or something. You know, nobody talks about it, but they all know. And I've kind of become friends with this guy that he moved here. He's probably been here just a couple of months, and he was living in Texas, and you know, Texas is a music town.
Yes, it is.
And a great one, I might add. And he came here, and he was like, well, you know, I had my own group, and I was doing this and that. And he came to a couple of our gigs, and he seemed to like what I was doing, and he was giving me tone compliments, which always makes me feel good, and that's instant buddy stuff, you know.
Right.
And so he's done a couple of lessons here and there on the Skype and on Zoom and all that. And so anyway, you know, a lot of what we did, we were discussing how to kind of get into this scene. And lo and behold, he's playing a lot. He's already started really jumping in quick, you know. And of course, you know, it's terrifying for a new person, you know, to jump into this thing. Because if you do well and get along with everybody, all of a sudden you get a lot of calls and you get overwhelmed.
Right.
And you can kind of start saying, man, I don't know all these songs and I don't know all these arrangements, you know. But it's a great thing. And you know, so we're always talking about, hey, if this happens, what do I do? You know, I said, man, number one priority, get an iPad, you know, get a bunch of charts, get that going. Because if you get in trouble, you have something to, you know, help yourself out with. And but yeah, the system is in place, and essentially, you could boil it down to two or three things, real simply. You know, you're sort of expected to be a good player.
Mm-hmm.
Expected that, and whatever you call good, who knows what that means. But if you're pretty decent, everybody here is pretty decent,
Mm-hmm.
at least, and then on up. So the second part of that is more important. You've got to be the good hang. You've got to be the person that people don't hate to be around.
Mm.
Whether it be you got to ride the tour bus for 72 hours and make small talk with people, or you've got to just on stage don't be annoying. And so if you're a person that everybody enjoys being around, and you pretty much know the standard tunes,
Right.
you can play as much as you want to play here, absolutely as much as you want. I never in my wildest dreams would have thought I would get to a point where I'd say I can turn him away. I always thought, you try to do what you can, as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
But you can definitely, like I say, if you get into the circle of how this thing works here, you can turn it away. You can kind of just say, man, the gigs will stack up. You can play 16 hours a day if you want to.
Unbelievable. That is a lot.
It's a lot to deal with.
We have more comments.
Yes, more.
Paul Arrowood joined.
Oh, well, is there any way to kick off some of these people? I'm kidding, of course. I love that man. Hello to Paul.
He says you are a master at being prepared.
Oh, well, I try to be prepared. It's hard, it takes time. It makes a big difference in everything, As I told you in some of our conversations, I'm the one thing I'm all about. I am chronically early.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just early, like so early it's kind of just dumb, but it's just because I have that panic that I'm going to be late. And the reason that I have a panic for being late is because whenever I've been late, which is very rare,
Right.
I'm in such a state I'm not worth anything. I remember one time we had a show. I guess we were playing, maybe it was a 6 to 10, and somehow maybe we had changed the time or something, and I had gotten it screwed up.
Okay.
And maybe we were playing the late shift, like 10, and then all of a sudden we were playing the 6. And so I was sitting there at the house. I had the guitar strung up, everything ready, packed up, and it was about like 5:50. And I was thinking, well, I'm going to make a pizza. I'm going to do this. And then somebody called me and said, hey, you remember we're at 6, right? And I'm like, no, I don't. And so I rapidly got to the gig, and I was maybe a few minutes late.
Right.
It was probably not a big deal, but I was a complete disaster. I thought I was just going to lay down on the stage and just have somebody just, walk all over my head. And, I just like profusely apologized to everybody. And then the first, 85 songs I felt shaky on. But, everybody just sort of said, oh, man, who cares, kind of,
Right.
But that's my thing. I'm just chronically early because I think about stuff like that. I'm like, man, I can't play under that circumstance. I have to get there, kind of chill a little bit, get into my environment, and just kind of go from there. Start clean, relaxed. So that's it.
Now, I'm going to go back to the tone versus technique.
Okay, great.
For a second. Is it important, the cost of the musical instrument that you play? Can you personally play on a lesser value instrument and get the same sound that you were trying to strive for?
That's a complicated question. Yes and no.
Okay.
More or less, you can. Um, but I think it comes down to like a couple of things that are that are really the key points with that. Um, the first one, which is probably the most important all the way around, is your comfort zone. In other words, the guitar that I play most of the time is a guitar that I custom ordered with specifications that I like. And so,
Okay.
in other words, the neck shape is the shape that I prefer, and all those little details. And so, when I pick it up, I know that again, that's an instrument that pretty much doesn't allow me any excuses.
Right.
It's kind of like this guitar is the guitar that I'm probably most comfortable with, so I have no excuses. I should feel just real happy about things when I pick it up.
Right.
If I pick up something that is, let's just say, use the term loosely, lesser,
Mm-hmm.
uh, regardless of whether it's money or whatever, lesser quality or lesser price, if
Mm-hmm.
it is lesser in the fact of meeting my favorite preferences,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to cause my comfort level to go down, and probably I will be a degraded player. So, in other words, if I get a guitar that has a real skinny neck, or it just kind of doesn't ring right or something, I'm going to have the tendency to try to compensate for that in some
Okay.
kind of fashion, some sort of twisting of dials or pedals, or I'm going to try to play differently to try to make up for it. And it's probably going to be okay, but it's going to put me out of my comfort zone. So I'm probably going to, if there's anything that I would play in a given night that I'm kind of skating on the edge anyway,
Mm-hmm.
then I could get into trouble, and start making mistakes or whatever. Like, give you an example, I can think of a guitar I used to own, and I don't have to like bust any guitar
Right.
business or anything like that, but I
Right.
remember there was one that the neck had nitro lacquer, and for some reason that guitar, the lacquer was just really sticky, you know. And I already have a little bit of the problem with that because my sweat is acidic. And as soon as I start playing on the strings, I start sweating on them, they start getting rusty. And then all of a sudden you go for a slide and you can't move. It's very friction. And, stuff starts getting in the way. So anyway, on this particular instrument with the lacquer, it had a heavy lacquer on the neck, it'd get real sticky. And so I would just be zipping around trying to get here and there really quickly. And because it had so much friction, I would not get to where I needed to get to and start making a lot of mistakes. And at some point, I just said, "Man, I just can't play this. It's too sticky." So there's oddball things like that you never realize until it happens. You say, "Okay, I can't deal with that. I've got to move on to something that I can work with." So the other part, though, comes down to setup. You can take a guitar that's very cheap, for example, um, or cheaper quality, whichever way that goes. It might cost a little bit, but not be that great a quality, or it might be great quality that doesn't cost much. Either way,
Right.
but you can take something that, at least if it's pretty decent, and if you set it up, put the strings to the height that you prefer, have pickups that make a sound that you're fairly happy with or you can work with, you should
Mm-hmm.
be able to get something very reasonable. You know, I think generally, if you are kind of the player, and almost everybody is, if you're the person that has that one instrument or those two that you just really honed in on, if you get on something that's a little foreign, it's gonna it's gonna throw you. I don't care how good you are. it's going to throw you because you're just so used to that old pair of shoes, and you put that other one on, it's going to hurt your foot, you know. And I'm so finicky about every little detail, you know. I'll just be a complete worry wart if there's a 30-second note difference in my action, you know, or a 30-second measurement, that is, not a 30-second note.
Right.
1/32, I can feel it easily, you know, because all of a sudden you say, hey, I was doing this lick that was kind of difficult and really fast. And then if you know, put that one deviation, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, man, I fell off the track, couldn't make it, you know. I try to get it honed in real exact so that you can really get something special every time. And so it's hard when any of that deviates. I'm a nutcase about all of it, you know. Some people just play anything and get anything out of it, you know. But you should be able to get very reasonable, you know, reasonable tone, reasonable, you know, results out of something.
And we have more comments
All right, comments, good.
from Alan Lowe.
Yeah.
Alan says, I would say yes. That cat could play a washboard and make it sound great.
It's funny you mentioned that. We had a guy that came in and played the washboard in the middle of one of our sets one time. It was very bizarre. I really thought he was insane, but he just kind of walked up and to the stage, and he wanted to get up. This has been like a year ago or something, and he got up and he was up there scrubbing away on it, and people went crazy, and we just laughed, and that was that. Well, thank you, Alan. That's very kind. Like I say, every little thing kind of throws me out of whack if it's not just right, but I try hard to get all those details so that each time it's something good. And one thing I did learn, and you know, I probably learned some of it on Alan's gig, and I learned it on all the other ones too, eventually, was that every gig counts. Every single one of them counts. And it's really cool to play a show and see a packed house, you know, and everybody loves that. And playing those arena shows was like nothing else, you know, seeing the big old, just really packed house. That blows your mind, and it gives you an energy that you just didn't even know you had. But I can tell you from much experience, I have played so many shows to an empty house where years later somebody would approach you and say, I remember that one time at the so and so, you know, at the Red Lion, like Richard Smith was talking, you know, at the Red Lion with Sketchbook or something. When he was at that show, there might have been 10 people at that show. There might have been 200, but there might have been 10. Because with Sketchbook, we were such an interesting group. I'll use that term.
Mm-hmm.
That you know, we couldn't always get the Saturday night at 9 o'clock slot,
Mm-hmm.
and so we played to plenty of empty houses, and man, we played some amazing stuff to those empty houses, you know. And I definitely feel strongly about that because, again, I've had so many people come up later and say, "Oh, I saw you over at the so and so," and it would be like I would be thinking, "Oh man, that was like the worst gig I ever did." But they would give you a positive review. I sort of, whew, you know, so I feel like every one of them is important, um, because if you start slacking off, it's like there's the two people that remember you for the rest of your life, you know. I had one guy told a friend of mine, he said, yeah, man, I remember he played some cool stuff at the skating rink. You know, I remember I played a gig at the skating rink when I was a teenager. And it came down the grapevine many years later I was teaching a friend of mine in a guitar lesson. He said, "Oh, my friend told me, and that would have been 20 years before then." And he said, "Oh, I remember, my friend said you were good. He saw you at the skating rink." I thought, "Oh man, I'm glad I wasn't just fooling around that day." Every one of them is important. For anybody listening, they're all important. All of them. Because you don't get the big ones without the little ones.
Very true. Very true. So I got another gear technique question.
All right.
When did you finally realize that turning your amp up to 11 is not necessary for every single gig and every single song?
So you're saying it's not. Huh. How do I get out of this one? I've been using that excuse. You got to do that. Well, I actually play pretty loud. Loud is not. It's not in vogue right now. The stages have gotten more and more quiet in the past few years, more than ever. And I'm going to say maybe that started in the churches.
Okay.
Because the church scene, when I was a little kid and like I went to church, you stood out front and maybe you sang along with a choir or something like that, and it was kind of a small, just kind of a small kind of thing. Um, but now it's developed where if you go to a church and they have a band, it's like Hillsong. It's like epic. They have like the best players, and they're just everybody's like A-list players, and they have all the best gear, and they have big PAs and video screens, and it's such a big presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at some point, somewhere along the road, when they started that, they started saying, well, we're in a church. We can't really have you playing a Marshall and 10, wailing like Clapton in 68. You can't really have you doing that. So they started doing more of the isolating of the amps, whether it be in an isolated box off stage. Then, of course, we got into the era of modeling and that. So you'd have maybe a pedal or a rack unit that you plug straight in the PA. Everybody starts using in-ears and all those sorts of things. And so the stage has gotten more and more quiet as time goes on. And that's probably not a bad thing because, I've been just absolutely blowing my ears out for years. And it's kind of funny to think, when I think back to like some of my old rigs, mentioning Sketchbook again, we used to play Joe's Underground every week. And I'd go in there with like a 4x12 and just winding it up so just crazy loud and just knocking the paint off the wall, and having a great time doing it, just loving it, feeling like I was just rocking the universe. But you can't really do it that loud anymore. But also, the other part about volume, I learned from a few of my favorite players. Jimmy Herring is one of my favorites. I didn't mention him earlier. He's a really good one. He's a little more modern than some of those I mentioned. Jimmy's sensational. He's really good at this thing I'm about to talk about, and that is, you could maybe call it being on dynamic alert.
Yes, there you go.
That's a term you could use. So, for example, I realized pretty long time ago that if you're playing, especially in a bigger band, it's one thing if you're a trio and you're kind of jamming Allman Brothers or something, that's a little different. But if you're in a band where you trade solos with other musicians, like multiple guitar players, keyboards, all those various things that you might have, sax players, whatever, at that point, if you don't want to be completely annoying, you need to pay attention to what's going on and be able to control your dynamics. So, for example, if there's a sax player, a keyboard player, a fiddle player, and two guitars, while the sax player is taking a solo, I don't need to be playing full out volume. I need to be back, in the mix a little bit. And so I'm always riding my volume control, or my volume pedal usually.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that I've sort of grown to do it over the years is I actually have the amp fairly cranked up.
Okay.
It's actually pretty decent volume, but I try to get a smoother sound that's not annoying to your ear. And by doing it only at the right time, really winding it up, then it gives the perception of not being loud all the time, but you're still able to be heard.
Okay.
Because see, the thing that drives me crazy is, okay, we'll put your amp on 1 and everything's so quiet. Well, as soon as the drummer ramps up, as soon as the bass player ramps up, I go for my full on rock in the world domination mode. And then I'm like, I hear nothing.
Right.
I hear nothing. So then they say, oh, let's put you through the monitors. Right. So you can ruin my guitar sound. So I'd rather have my amplifier, which is my monitor,
Mm-hmm.
and no wedge monitor. And so I can just regulate the volume on the stage, which is the blend with the other players, which is what they're doing, and then if I can kind of keep my dynamic thing correct, then I'll be heard at the points I need to be heard. I can pull back when somebody else is doing something. If somebody's singing, especially in a ballad, you don't just, rip into stuff, and I don't play solos over the verses. That's very common in sort of honky tonk music. They love to noodle around keys and guitars and steel guitar and all that. But I think it's better to have a call and response kind of thing with that than to just walk over the vocal. So for me, dynamic control is key. And whenever it was I first started getting onto that kind of thing, all of a sudden everything takes on a whole different picture, because then you've kind of assumed the role that they actually want you to have,
Mm-hmm.
and not the role that you think you should have.
There you go. Exactly.
Which is, what do they really want you in the band for? They want you in the band to make the band sound good or better.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you make the band sound better while you're in it, then they don't want you out of it. So that's the key, So there's plenty of times where I'm playing real quiet. But then, if we're going to go into something really rocking or a big loud solo, then I'm going to crank it up. And I basically set my volume based on what is my loudest solo tone need to be. So in other words, the loudest I ever need to be is going to be this, and that's where I set it to. Right. And then I use my volume pedal to bring it back whenever I'm not at that point. And that it works beautifully. It works perfectly.
I cannot tell you, Geoff, how many times I have seen bands, and I'm not calling any bands out, but one of the things that I noticed being in my advanced age of doing this is I pay a lot of attention to dynamics in a band, and I can automatically tell.
It's everything.
It is everything for a band. It's a make it or break it.
Well, it is. It is. Now you can have a band that maybe they're just like a punk band or a metal band that can have sort of like no dynamics, and that's kind of their thing.
Yeah,
you can have that. But in my experience, for people in the audience, something that dynamically is really well done is much more awesome to listen to. they like it better. They don't get their ears blown out all of the time. And the other thing is, in the case of what I do so often, you know, 3.5 hours wears on you quick. You know, if I play just full on, rock, just, everything wound up to 10 for 3.5 hours, well, after about the first hour, we'd all just be on the floor somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if I did that about the first 20 minutes, I'd probably get fired. So I save it till the important point, the Van Halen songs or whatever,
Right.
that's okay. I wind it up then, and nobody fusses,
Right.
But also, I also realize that one thing that comes into play, again, locally, is, when we go into play, we have sound people come in, sound techs, and they come in and they kind of set the sound, and they usually do it in about 15 minutes. Right? They don't do all this, checking for hours and that sort of thing. They come in and it's quick. And so what happens is after they do that quick,
Mm-hmm.
they leave. They leave, they go right out the door and they go to the next one. And so, in other words, you might have a sound tech, he comes in for our thing, he comes in for 10 or 15 minutes, he knocks that out, he goes next door.
Right.
Almost all of the sound techs do about 3 clubs at a time. And then a lot of times they come back to make sure the whole place is not in flames, But the point being, they set it, and your singer says, hey, that's good for me. And so then think about what could happen while they're gone. Okay, let's just say I'm just winding up to 10.
Right.
And then the singer is going to say, hey, I can't hear myself. I'm singing my throat out, and so on and so on. You can get in a lot of trouble like that. I won't say I've done it, but I know it's been done.
It's been done.
It's been done a lot. And I've been in groups where it's been done and I'm not the one doing it. So I'm just thinking, oh, God, we're going to have so much trouble here, And of course, if one person is really loud, then other people have to be loud.
Mm-hmm.
But I still play too loud,
Well, it's like a ping pong lesson, because if one person gets loud, then the next person gets loud, and then you're kind of like you're competing throughout the night.
Yeah, you are. You are. And at some point there's a diminishing return where it's just so cranked up you can't tell what's going on. At that point the singer can't hear themselves sing. The guitar players can't hear their solo, especially if you got 2 of them. Boy, I love playing with some of my guitar buddies because some of them are so good, and I enjoy just hanging with them. But, if I had to choose, I would always choose playing with a keyboard player because they cover a certain part of the landscape that's not my exact frequencies.
Okay.
And that allows them to play the way they want to play. It allows me to play the way I want to play. And when it blends together, I don't ever feel like I'm fighting. If like fighting for the space,
Space, right.
But if you
Right.
have 2 guitar players, especially if they have the same kind of sound, like you go, man, this guy's tone and this guy's tone are really similar, they're going to start canceling each other. And then next thing you know, well, I can't hear myself because all I hear is him, and he's thinking the same. They're covering the same frequencies, canceling the same frequencies, and then all of a sudden, it's that, And I know I've been a part of it. I've been guilty. I'm charged. I've played too loud because there was another guitar player, and I'm like, man, I can't hear anything. I'm just going to crank it up to the ceiling.
Right.
But at some point, you have to just kind of say, okay, wait a minute. We got to put a cap on it. We got to stop it. But it's easier without 2. But now, if you got 2 players, even if they have the same kind of sound, if they have that dynamic thing, if they really know how to do that, it works flawlessly. Because then somebody's paying attention, saying, "Hey, well, he's doing that. I'm gonna pull it back down." You know, then you're working like you're supposed to work. But it's hard when you're not.
So, how do you compensate for someone who has that crank it up to 11, a lack of dynamic alertness? How do you handle that if you're in a band with someone like that?
Secretly cut his speaker cable. I don't know. um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard. You know what? I hate doing that. First of all, not the speaker cable part. I would never do
Right,
that.
right.
I hate having to compensate for that, because usually what it means for me means there's a tonal change. In other words, like I've got my favorite kind of tone thing I'm trying to go for. And
Right.
typically when that happens, I have to change that mindset, because the tone that I'm often going for is a little darker, a little smoother, and the tone that a lot of other people are going for is a lot brighter, and that's okay. It's not really my bag per se, but
Right.
it's okay. People do it, and it works. And I think part of that is just comes down to a couple things. One is, in some cases they just don't know how to do anything else, and then in other cases, if you have like a lot of mid-range or a lot of treble kind of frequencies, it really cuts through the mix. So if the band is rocking and you've got a bright sound,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to play on 10 to be heard, you know. And because of the nature of things, where it's all going, as we're getting more quiet with the amps, on stage volume going down, guess what's going up? Treble and mid range. Because as you get more quiet, they're saying, well, I can't hear anything. I better turn the treble up. That'll let me hear better. So, but there's still, some of us old geezers hanging on that are saying, well, this guy over here, he's playing loud and bright. So I'm the guy that's trying to do the opposite of everybody. They're trying to play quiet and trebly, and I'm trying to play a little bit loud and smooth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what I grew up with. And
Right.
plus, that's when the magic happens. If you're kind of cranked up with a tube amp and the speaker is kind of pushing a little bit and it starts losing that treble
Mm-hmm.
because it's not efficient enough to create it, it kind
Right.
of starts losing. Then you get those classic sounds. You get those beautiful lead sounds that are real sweet on your ear. That's always what I'm trying to get. It's the hardest thing to get, but that's what I'm always trying to get. And nowadays, most people are going for bright. So, with all that said, what I sort of have to do when I'm in that situation is I have to take off the smooth idea and say, look, okay, I'm going to have to go for a little brighter, a little more cutting, and if I have to crank it up some more, and I'll still do my dynamic thing. But when I need to rip it through, I'm just going to have to crank it through as hard as I can go, to get it to work. And sometimes that's challenging. I played a gig. This has been probably 5 years ago here,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a guy that called me last minute, and I knew the guy. I was familiar with him. Um, he's a friend or associate or whatever, but I'd never played with him. And he always had a bunch of different amps. He'd be a lot of times he'd play a little tiny amp, and sometimes he'd be playing something plugged into the PA direct. I thought, okay. So I brought my little combo like I normally bring. And I get to the gig, and he's got a Marshall 100-watt head and cabinet. And I thought, oh, this is not going to be good. And I'm telling you, he was letting it rip. He had it so loud, it made your teeth hurt. And I had my amp almost all the way up to keep up with it. And of course, again, while he was singing and while things were going, I was pulling it way down. But if we start trading solos, I had to crank up the mids and the treble and just wind it just completely up, so loud. But that hardly ever happens now. Another thing about the volume playing with other people, I chuckle to think about this because when we played the biggest arena shows I have ever played in my life, I used the same amp that I played downtown, and here's the funny part, on the same volume. On the same volume, and it was 20,000 people sold out. And the sound guys, they were like, man, your tone is so great. I was like, little tears about to spew out. And the guy, because it's Clare Brothers sound, was like the biggest ever, and these guys, they worked everybody. And of course, this was on the Alan Jackson shows. And I remember the guy came up and he said, check this out. And he pulled up his phone. He said, here's some guys I was working with. And he showed me pictures of Billy Gibbons and Jeff Beck and Clapton. He ran their sound too. I was just like, oh man, this is unreal. But yeah, I played the same amp. It's a Fender combo with one 12-inch speaker, roughly half the volume, halfway up or whatever. And that's about what I played downtown, the same volume. In an arena, I thought, and it was loud enough. I mean, you in that room, you could have wound it up. I could see how, like somebody like, Van Halen, he could go in with a big stack or two, and you could wind it up because it's so much space that you could space them out. You could go ahead and do it. But I was using the same thing on the same volume, and they didn't fuss about it either. And they don't fuss at me downtown as well. So it's just a crazy thing. The volume thing is different than it was 20 years ago. But if you come in with both guns blazing, they'll get on you. They'll get on you fast. And that's got to come down. And of course, almost every club uses these little barriers. Have like little baffles.
Oh.
It's just, some have them homemade, some have them look like they were made on like a fancy company, but it's just a little sort of plywood baffle. It goes in front of the amp. They block the sound.
Oh.
Yeah, because they want the stage volume. They know that you're going to misbehave, basically. And so some of those guys down there, I know a couple of friends of mine that come in with like loud amps, and they still wind them up, but they have the baffle in front of it. And so they're just, and I've blown a lot of speakers doing that because I would just be like, man, I'm just going to keep cranking it. I got to get the cranking going. And you put the baffle in front of it, it knocks it all out. And so you're just like, I want some more,
Right.
I've just kind of learned my way around that now. I've got kind of what I would call the sweet spot of it's loud enough for me, and I still have the baffle, and nobody complains. At least currently. As of today. Nobody.
Got another comment here.
All right.
This is from Alan Lowe.
Yeah.
And he says, this guy is the stuff, which I've known this for the years that we've worked together.
Yeah. Alan's the stuff. I haven't seen him in a couple of minutes for sure, but he was a great front man. We used to play those gigs, and he would do that thing that the good front person can do, which is brew excitement.
That's right.
Not every person on the front of the stage can engage the people in a way that they get really fired up about it. He was always good at that, and that's that's important, you know.
Extremely.
I mean, you know, and hey, I could not even dare think that I would say that I'm a front man that could do such a thing. You know, I don't really even sing, but
Right.
you know, even if I sang, I might be the guy going, we're gonna play a song now. It's gonna be pretty cool. Might be good, you know, but you have to kind of get them riled up, you know. So Alan was always good at that. He'd get them going, get them cranked up. So thank you for that as well.
Well, you know, Geoff, I brought up these, and I'm harping on the technique so much because my
Yeah,
audience has a lot of up and comers,
yeah,
and you know, A&R is like it's an antique thing right now. You know, to have an A&R person to
right,
actually teach,
right,
and it's kind of in our hands. Our hands to help where we can,
sure.
and that dynamic quotient is a major.
It's huge, and no offense to anybody out there
Right.
listening, you know, but there's a lot of you not doing that. I'm sorry to say, you know, hope they learn something from that. I mean, it's a big deal. And you know, the thing is, if you really get in tune with that, it becomes part of your thing.
Yes.
You don't think about it. You know, you don't think, okay, wait a minute, I need to make sure, you know, like writing yourself a note, you know, I make sure tonight at the show I'm alert. No, that needs to be your thing. You need to be into it to the point that it's a very natural
Hmm.
kind of thing. You know, I mentioned using the volume pedal for that, you know, on my pedals and stuff. That's kind of the accelerator, if you want to call it that, you know, and so I'm really used to doing that.
Hmm.
And if you've ever seen the players that use, like, say, a Hammond organ,
Right.
you know, they're really keen on that pedal that operates the Hammond,
Hmm.
and that becomes part of it. You know, just like a regular piano player, you're not going to find a piano player that says, "Oh, I don't use a sustain pedal." That is part of the recipe of how that thing works.
That's right.
And for me, I really don't play the guitar without a volume pedal because that's my control. Now, you can do it from the guitar,
Hmm.
but it works a different way if you're able to keep playing and operate it with your foot. You know, that gives you the option of, you know, some things that work well in real life situations. One is if you're playing a song and maybe you want to fade out. You know, I love doing a live fade out. People flip over that because they think it's not possible. But if you're playing, you continue playing your part and your pedal, you just gradually bring it back down. And so that gives it that real authentic fade out sound. So that's a great way to use that effect. And so I've made the pedal thing part of my thing. I highly recommend it. It's not like I'm like breaking down, you know, new doors of excitement or anything. It's been done a million times, but I sort of just don't see how everybody doesn't do it, you know.
Right.
But that's, again, it's subjective. It's my thing, you know. I made it my thing, you know.
A lot of it, a lot of what you mentioned, being a guitarist and being a singer, there's a, I mean, they're like kinfolk, very
Well,
close.
they are, and you know, uh, I as a guitar player can make your life as a singer hell.
Yes.
You know, because I could just make a bunch of racket and kind of cover up whatever it is you're doing. You could be singing the greatest thing, the greatest line. You could be doing sort of what I joke about, the vocal calisthenics. So you could be hitting all the sonic notes and all the amazing lines, and I
Hmm.
could be covering up every bit of it. You know, and part of it's because the guitar definitely has some frequencies and a vocal range. Um, it's not the exact same thing, but depending on the way that I play chords or notes, I could end up finding the spot right where you are and covering it up.
Exactly.
I'm real keen on that whole thought process because that's how you win. You know, that's how you win this whole thing. That's how you get the gigs. Again, you go back to, if you make the band sound good, you know, I think about, like, to be honest, every time I see players, it kind of in the back of my mind, I don't mean to, but you know, you calculate, and you know, you're judging them so hard, and you know, you're not holding up scorecards, but
Right.
sometimes I'm thinking to myself, that guy's not listening to anything that's going on. You know, I'm not thinking of anybody specific. I'm
Right.
thinking real general.
In
But
general.
if I go and see a band and I'm thinking, wow, the keyboard player just took a solo and all I could hear is guitar strumming, or the other way, you know, the guitar guy's soloing and everybody else is as loud as they can go and cymbals crashing, and you know, Hammond B3 with the Leslie is going full volume, and just, it's like we're not playing together. It's
Right.
kind of like we're playing at each other, you know.
Right.
I am very blessed to be in a group that is very in tune with that concept. And it has, I can honestly tell you, it is almost never spoken about. It is just a plain fact. That's the way it's got to be. And whenever we've had people fill in that didn't follow that unspoken rule, it's always been later. It's been the comments, you know, like, oh man, so and so was this, you know. And you know where that leads to, right? We're not going to call them next time.
That's right.
That's the nutshell of that, is, you know, because the thing is, part of the system, the way this works around here, um, it's kind of a thing that fixes itself, if that makes sense. You know, like, for example, um, if you have the option of having, let's just say, 25 drummers, think carefully about what you're going to do. Like, you'll say, okay, hey, I think this guy, I saw him one time, he's pretty good. All right, you get him. Immediately, you're going to play the gig, and the whole time during the gig and after the gig, you're going to be thinking, was it awesome or was it ridiculous? And then, you know, if it was great, you're going to think, I'll keep his number, you know. I mean, to be honest, that's how I got the gig, you know. Meeting Amanda was a real interesting thing. You know, I got here, um, this will be chapter 2 of my life story. Um, I moved to Nashville and I lived with a buddy of mine. I knew 3 people when I got here. I lived with a buddy of mine for maybe 3 or 4 months before I got my own place. And within maybe the second month or so, one of the people I knew called me and said, hey, and at this point, I mean, I was not working. I was just kind of rustling around trying to find something to do,
Right.
really kind of just sweating bullets because I'd moved, you know, didn't know what to do. And so he called me and he said, hey, you know, I have an opportunity to do this gig, do a fill-in gig, but I'm not going to take it. Do you have interest in doing it? And I said, I don't care what it is. I have interest in doing it. I don't care. I don't care what it is. I'm into it because I need to do something. And it was with Amanda. And I'd never met her. And so it was a real curious thing. You know, I was here, but I didn't know how things work. So, of course, as everything works here, they expect you to be everything already.
Mm-hmm.
So I contacted one of the people in the band, not her, and said, "Hey, you know, I guess I'm doing your gig, but I don't know what songs you play or anything. Can you send me a list? He said, oh, yeah, I'm going to send you a list. So he sent me a list of about 50 songs. And on those 50 songs, I was really excited to know about 3 of them. I thought, oh man, this is going to be really bad. This is terrifying. Well, when is this gig again? It's 2 weeks. I went, oh no. And so and this was before the iPads and the charts. I learned those songs. And so there, a lot of times around here, when you go on the road, there's different, without giving the secret giveaway, there's places that they go to meet.
Right.
Like every now and then I go to Walmart and I'll see like a tour bus out there, and it's like, oh, everybody, we meet at the Walmart on so and so Avenue or whatever. And so they gave me a place to meet. So I get there. Here's 4 or 5 other musicians. I know none of them, never seen any of them. Amanda wasn't there. So I get in the van, go to North Carolina from here.
Right.
That's about 8 to 10 hours in that van with all these people I don't know. And my brain is just about to pop to remember all these songs. And I get there, and it's some kind of like banquet room. I'm going to say it seems like it was something for some kind of event, like maybe like a fireman thing or something. I don't even remember now.
Mm-hmm.
A huge room. It's probably a 600-seat room or something. And I was just terrified. I was just like, man, I don't know what I'm just probably going to mess up so bad. So I get in there, and all the musician people, of course, we talked the whole way there or whatever. They're all super cool. And actually a friend of mine lives in North Carolina, and so he came and met me at the gig, and that was my moral support.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, we get in the sound check, and that's the first time I meet Amanda. I'd never even seen her before. I'm just sort of in a panic, like, she's like, "Oh, thanks for playing our gig," and I'm just like thinking, "Oh, I hope I don't mess this up." I mean, I had to learn some of her original tunes and everything, and so anyhow, we start doing this little sound check, and it's one of those we could take half the day to do it. You had to play later, so they took their time. Sound person was great. PA was big. And as soon as the drummer started checking his drums, I thought, oh man, these people are good. These are great players. And everything Rachel on keys was just, like a Berkeley graduate and all this kind of stuff. All these people are so great. So we start playing. And again, I'm not even seeing Amanda, I met her earlier for like a minute,
Right.
We start playing, and then we're already playing the first song, and she comes out, ladies and gentlemen, that was the old country thing. You introduce the person who walked out.
Right.
And so we started playing. Anyway, we played the gig. It was pretty good. I felt okay about it. And at the end of it, because at that point, she basically had pretty much a regular band. She had another guitar player, but he really wasn't a lead player. He was kind of, more just kind of a chord player, and he sang a little bit. And she had just been getting fill-ins every gig. And so at the end of the gig, she said, "You want to play some more?" I was like, "Yeah." And I've been there ever since. It's been 6 years,
50 songs, and you only knew 3.
There might have been 4, but there was a whole bunch of, and I mean, just to show what a rookie I am. These were things that not only did I not know, but I didn't know what they were. For example, I looked down the list and it would say so and so song by Miranda Lambert, and I go, I don't know who Miranda Lambert is. I don't know what she looks like. I've never heard the song. I'm just as green as the pasture. So it was kind of challenge, you could say, to learn all that. But I've been playing with her ever since, and that's kind of different than the typical. I move into Nashville and start playing music. That's
Right.
typically it's not like that. You come here and you start making friends and you sit in and you kind of do that thing. That's kind of the normal thing. But I just came in and accidentally sort of got a gig, and it turned out, to be really good, I think. And I've sort of the whole time, I've sort of been on high alert, like I need to not irritate these people too much, and kind of do the best I can do with it so that I can keep going with it. And of course, at some point we were doing more road stuff, but at some point we started in the Broadway thing, and then it took on a little different shade.
Right.
And then that whole thing about the 50 song thing, that almost became a joke then, because it was like, oh yeah, well, so yeah, we know like a million. I'm like, oh no, it was always learning songs constantly. And these guys, they know everything. Every now and then they'll not know something, and I just laugh because it'll be something like, an AC/DC song. They'll say, which one is that? I'm like, oh God, I played that for 35 years. But yeah, it's, I guess the modern way here is that like everybody knows a zillion songs. I couldn't even imagine how many we actually know, because essentially we know a whole bunch. We probably know a few hundred,
Right.
but we essentially take a stab at like every song on earth practically. At some point, we probably have. I mean, you'd be surprised, if you said, "Oh, have you ever tried that?" Probably, even if it's something really weird and goofy or something. Somebody that comes to town wants to hear it.
Very true. More comments.
More comments. Comments are good.
Paul Knight.
Yeah, I know it.
He's listening and watching. He says this is an awesome interview. He's enjoying it. And he also says that you gave him his first and only guitar lesson.
Well, maybe number two should. I hope it was good. I forget. It's been a long time, but man, that's great. I love hearing that, and I've given a lot of guitar lessons in my life, so it's easy for me to have forgotten, a million of them. But all I can say is it's kind of like doing gigs. You kind of have to try to give a good lesson, because man, people have an incredible memory. If they had like a terrible lesson, they're going to always remember that terrible lesson. They'll remember you gave it to them. And, they're going to tell everybody in the United States about it. It's crazy. I used to have a great record at the old music store, went for years and years and never irritated anybody, even one time. And like any kind of dispute in a lesson. And then there was this one woman, she came in. I don't remember her name. It's been forever and ago.
Right.
She came in and she had these really long, like acrylic nails.
Yeah.
And I said, it was her first lesson. I said, you're not going to be able to keep those. I said, so today, let's just talk about some basic stuff. We'll just kind of get some information. And so I explained to her a lot of concepts and how to read chord charts and how to do this and how to hold this and do this and whatever. And in about 2 minutes before the end of the lesson, she said, am I not going to be able to play a song today? And I said, no, you will not. I said, I would love to get you there, but I said, but that's That's pretty much an impossible thing for anybody starting off this. And you can't fret anything because your fingernails are like 2 inches long. And you know what she said then? I don't want to pay you. And I said, well, look, here's the deal. If you don't want to pay me, it's okay. I get it. But you're not going to get a song, and you're not going to get a song in 2 minutes. So maybe we're done here, And I think that's one of the only people that we ever had a disagreement in lessons out of all those years. I can't think of another one off the top of my head. There's probably one somewhere, but you just got to make them happy, Otherwise, and the other thing about that is if you don't make them happy, they might turn away from it. Like if you give them a bad scene, then they'll go back and say, I don't want to play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like how many guitar students I had that said, well, yeah, when I was, 8, I took piano lessons and hated it. I thought, gosh, that's terrible. They could have been the greatest pianist ever, but they just had a teacher that did something. He just turned them away from it somehow. Maybe, of course, not by trying.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to make them happy. But yeah, Paul Knight, he's rocking. He's been playing music for years and years. I know.
He sure has.
I remember. It's been a while now.
Got another comment here.
Oh man,
This is from Pierre.
Who is this?
Pierre, and forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, because I'm bad with pronouncing names sometimes. It's either Gillenwater or Gillenwater. Did I get it right, Pierre? Let me know if I got your name right. Okay. He said, I think I saw Geoff in a Rush cover band when I lived in Augusta in the 90s.
Yep. That would have been Fugitive. That was the name of the band.
Oh.
Yep, Fugitive. And we never said, hey, we're going to be a Rush tribute band. But what happened was this. It was a 3-piece band, me and Clint, of course, me and Clint Watts.
That's right.
And Steve Key. And so what happened, we'd get in the practice room. We first started kind of jamming around. I don't even know how it happened, but inadvertently, we played a Rush song. And we all fell into it. And then we played another one and another one. And it just became a thing where we played other material. We played, we had a handful of original songs. We played other groups like Pink Floyd or some other classic rock or something. I don't even remember all the stuff we played.
Right.
But Steve was so good at playing all those drum parts like Neil Peart and Rush. And of course, me and Clint kind of grew up on Rush as well. So it was kind of like we just jokingly start playing something, and then we'd kind of all be able to kind of get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, strangely enough, inadvertently, we ended up where our set list, we had about 25 Rush songs on the set list. And then it kind of became a thing. And once something becomes a thing, well, it's a thing. People would come and say, hey, I heard these guys play Tom Sawyer, Free Will, Red Barchetta, all that. I got to see if it's legit or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty good. I'm sure there's somebody out there that does it better, but Steve was really great on those drum parts, and Clint would do the bass parts and sing and play the keyboards and the bass pedals, and we tried to give our best swing at doing the Rush thing. And it was a fun band. It was an awesome band. One of my favorites of all time.
Got another comment.
All right.
This is from Paul Arrowwood. He says, hey, brother, you are a class act. Send me your barbecue sauce recipe. Much love.
Some codes were meant to not be broken. That's all I can say. It's very true. I have a pact with my mom. You know, I've lost my parents and some of my family members. They passed on, but Mom said, keep the secret. So I am the only living being on earth that knows my grandfather's barbecue sauce recipe, and it's very tasty. And I never knew him because he was gone before my time, but I have the feeling that we had a lot in common because my grandfather, that was my mom's dad, he was real into the barbecue.
Right.
And you've got to hand it to somebody for that, because that's just perfect, good old American fun. But also, he played the banjo and the guitar. And so we didn't have a lot of musical lineage in my family. Everybody always thinks that if you play an instrument, you had generations of players or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother did play some classical piano. So there was some of that. And then my grandfather did play. He was sort of the bluegrass type, acoustic and banjo.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, and my brothers, I don't know of any family members, any of them, that played any music of any sort. If you're out there, raise your hand. I don't know who you are,
Uh,
but yeah, he was into a little bit into the music and into the barbecue. And Mom always told the stories with the barbecue, because at that point, we're talking about way back. They basically lived on something that was equivalent to a farm. And so they had pigs and chickens and all that sort of thing. And then he would go and do it fresh. Get a pig, and he would do it. And Mom said, oh, yeah, he'd start cooking the barbecue. And all of a sudden, you got a lot of neighbors walking up, checking on you, checking it out, wanting to get a bite, and so on. And she said, from miles around, people, if they found out that he was cooking, everybody was making the surprise visit all of a sudden, because his barbecue was just really top notch.
right.
And of course he had the sauce, thing going, but it's all about the sauce is secondary. You've got to get the other part. That's got to be cooked correctly and just so to make it just right. And then of course, when I was a kid, my dad got into it, and it was the exact same thing. He kind of learned it from my mom's dad. And I even remember as a kid, he made a little pit with the cement blocks and the grate and everything,
Right.
and he would cook the pork, and the same thing would happen. All of a sudden, everybody on the street was walking by. And she said, your dad stopped cooking that out there because everybody would keep coming over, wanting to get a free niblet, of something. Which, of course, he would just kind of give it all away, and then we'd be sitting there watching, hey, we didn't get anything. But I did the same thing. When I started doing the barbecue all the time, I'd take it to work, and I'd take it here, and I wouldn't even eat any of it. I'd end up just giving it away. And so it's a tradition, all about the cue,
I'll
but
have
not getting the recipe.
I'll have to post some pictures because I saw some of that good looking barbecue you whipped up there. Yeah, you don't have. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. I don't do a lot of different things. I don't have a lot of different hobbies or interests even, but I'm good at eating. Good at eating. And therefore, indirectly, I got pretty decent at doing that barbecue. I've got a rib in the refrigerator right now, just itching to cook. It's going to happen soon. So, yeah, good
So
stuff.
do you do session work? Since have you done any session work
Yeah, a little bit.
since you've been?
That's it's kind of like another whole chapter, I wouldn't call myself a session person per se, because I've
Okay.
got some buddies that do it all day, every day.
Hmm.
Um, and they're very good at it. It's hard to do that work. And because of the fact that I sort of beat myself up on it sometimes, it's challenging for me to do it because I can always find something that's like, well, that's just not so. And nowadays, the level of perfection that people expect, as the years go by, the expectations get higher. If you go back and listen to old recordings of classic rock like the Beatles or the Stones,
Right.
perfection is out the window. It's not even close to perfect. It's not perfectly in tune. It's not perfectly in time. It's beautiful just like it is. But now you have to be so on it for them to want you, to do that. So you have to get the tone and get the feel and get something that they get excited about and want you to do it. And so there's a handful of session players around, and they're really top notch, and they keep getting the calls because they go in and nail it.
Hmm.
Tom Bukovac comes to mind. He's one of the greatest session players probably there ever has been. Um, hey, he's a buddy of mine. He used to have a little music shop a couple of miles from here. I used to go hang out with him all the time. He's
Hmm.
an incredible player. Can just play anything. Has the great touch, great feel. He can get and he's been on everything in the last 20 years. I mean, he's been on. You've heard him. I mean, if you heard any music in the last 20 years, you've heard him. He's on something. He's on all the biggest stuff, whether it be the country stuff or if there's any rock and roll left, he's on it, you know. And of course, you got like Brent Mason, who did all the country, the 90s stuff. Like, he's on every Alan Jackson record, everything of all those guys of that era. Joe Diffie and
Hmm.
all that. He's on all that. And I think sometimes they say that Brent Mason is possibly the most recorded guitarist of all time because he's just been on so many recordings, and he is such an amazing. Yeah, I mean, he's an ace. He's kind of the dude. Um, but to answer this question properly, without deviating, I've done a little bit of it. A little bit of it, yeah, for sure. Um, I made a friend that I'm hoping I'll be able to pester later. Is Eddie Gore, if you're out there listening. Um, Eddie works at RCA Studios, and he is a masterful engineer. And boy, if you have his list of credit,
Hmm.
doing good because he's done it all, and he's done all the biggest and all the best, and still does. I mean, he doesn't have to fool around. He does the good stuff. And he's a great human. Lots of phone conversations, and I sent him some tracks for some projects, and so
Right.
that was cool. Really amazing, amazing. It's really, really exciting to work with somebody that you know is on point. Is just really the best, or the greatest, or. So it forces you to try to be your best because you're just like, man, you know, they could have called so and so for this.
Hmm.
You know, it's okay to be second call to Brent Mason, but it's like, you know, if they call Brent and they couldn't get him, and they somehow for some ridiculous reason call you, you better bring something good, because the other guy they called was going to bring the absolute best that it can be. So you don't want to be like, well, we got this guy, he's kind of lame, you know. We'll have to redo all this later, but we'll tell him we liked him, you know. You don't want to do that. Everybody's politically correct. Everybody's nice, you know.
Mhm.
But, you know, at some point, if you do something that's just not really great, they're going to have to replace it.
Yeah, very true.
It happens.
Um, Besides playing with Amanda, what are some of your most fondest musical moments?
I mean, just overall from my entire uh, super long history.
Mhm. Yep.
um, yeah, I've had some great ones. You know, some of the old groups in Augusta. You know, we did some good opening slots. You know, me and Clint did some slots playing with, like, opening for Foreigner. That was a great show. And you know, King's X and those kind of things. You know, some of those gigs. And oh, here's one that was really big for me personally, and I'm sure Clint loved it too. In Sketchbook, when we were doing all of our instrumentals and stuff, um, strangely enough, sort of by accident, really, I met one of my heroes, and I was in the music store one day, and of course, uh, much like some of this broadcast, I was talking about Steve Morse or something,
Mhm.
and this fellow walked by and he said, "Hey, you're a Steve Morse fan, huh?" And I said, "Oh yeah, man. He's just the bomb. You know, he's the dude. He's got it. He's got it all. He's the." I said, "Oh, you know him? You like him too?" And he said, "I like him pretty well. I played with him forever." You know, and I went, "Oh man." And I was looking at this guy. I was going, "You know what? He kind of looks familiar." And it was Alan Sloan. I should say, Dr. Alan Sloan. Dr. Alan Sloan is an anesthesiologist, and he played violin with the Dixie Dregs with Steve
Mhm.
for years and years. And what an amazing talent! He's got the best tone on that violin. If I could just get my guitar to sound like his violin playing, it would be perfect, you know. Um, he, but yeah, he was just mulling around the store, and eventually, um, we did some lessons with his son, you know, and I played a little bit with Alan, did a couple of things with him, and hung out with him. And I played tennis with him. That was cool. That wasn't a musical thing, but, you know,
Still.
it was really interesting to say, hey, I went over to the tennis court and played tennis with Alan Sloan. You know,
Mhm.
he's a pretty good tennis player, too. Um, you know, people like that, it seems like in my experience, people like that are really, really good at some certain thing, a lot of times they're like good at everything because they just have the knack of achieving things. You know,
Right.
I always felt like, you know, I had like one thing that I could kind of do a little bit, you know, but a lot of guys like that, I mean, to be a world class violinist and then be able to be in the medical field and be the top at that, that's amazing. You know, love that guy. Um, I was going to say that one of the really peak moments for me, and like I said, I know Clint too, and Nick also. We were playing a gig, and Alan came and played with us at the gig,
Okay.
and so it was like, wow. So we're playing like crazy instrumental music, and he's the guy that kind of spearheaded some of this for me, you know, playing with the Dregs and all that. And what was funny, we were playing like all these original tunes,
Yeah.
and of course, which meant that he'd never heard them as well as no one else had either. And he just came in and he sounded like he played with the band when the songs were written.
Mhm.
he fell in. He didn't overplay. He played exactly the way you wanted. And he would, we'd trade solos in a way that sounded like we had planned it all out. And every bit of it was absolutely off the cuff. That was really great. Great moment there. I'll never forget that one. That was a big one. And it was in Joe's Underground. It was a small place, but it was pretty packed. And I think a lot of people probably, maybe they didn't even know who he was, but they knew something cool was happening because it sounded really good when he was playing. So, guys like that, when they sound that good, they can't help but make the band sound better. And that kind of goes back to my theory earlier, that's really that's the main thing. You can get lost in, I've certainly got lost trying to make myself sound better, get the tone or get the flashiest, coolest licks that will blow somebody's brain out, But in the end, none of it means anything unless the people in the band go, "Oh yeah, that's it. You're the dude." Once they say, "We'd rather have you than anybody else because you do the right thing that we want," that you've won at that point. At that point, it doesn't matter who can play what. As long as you secured that, if you check that box, you've won. So for those up and comers, shoot for that. That's what you shoot for. If you get that, you win. You win every time.
Wow. So tell me about your lessons. What if someone in the audience wanted to know about, they may want to get a lesson from you?
They may want to. I'm doing some of that over Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and some of that. It's based mostly on, do I have open time and can we line it up? I'm all about it. I love doing it. I've always loved doing lessons. I loved them when I did them full time. And, there's definitely been some years in the past few years where I haven't done that many because I've just been playing too much. Teaching guitar and music is my second favorite thing to do. Playing it is my first favorite. And I would say, there's that old saying that says, I hate that saying where they say, they teach because they can't do or some foolishness like that.
Yeah.
I absolutely think that's just rubbish. It's an art form in itself to just be able to teach music. Even if you never, ever play a live gig in your whole life, you never do session work, you never record. If you just teach and that's all the thing you do and that's your bag, well, go for it. It's awesome. If you can somehow convince somebody to practice and give them something good to learn, then there's magic in that too. And I've always enjoyed trying my best to do that. You have to inspire them somehow. And some people it's harder to inspire than others. And some come into a lesson and they're just really ramped up and ready for any little nugget that you give them. And then just every little piece of it is super exciting. And that's the ones that go far, so, but yeah, if they want to contact me, probably the easiest way is just Facebook,
Okay.
And of course, then we can get on with, doing the phone or whatever and all that. But that's just the easiest thing to reach out, So yeah, all welcome to reach out to me. I'm into it. Whenever I have time, I'll do it.
So is there anything else you want to cover? I can keep going, but I want to make sure I, watch your time.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I probably told all my life story by now.
Are you sure you don't want to beat Paul's record?
What's that?
You want to beat Paul's record, interview record time?
I don't know if I can beat Mr. Airwood. I probably can't beat him. My coffee might be wearing down now. I'm not as much. I might not blab as fast. All I can say is just, for those who are up and coming musicians or people that have been doing it a long time, it's a real challenge to do this. I don't want to like turn anybody away by saying that, but I'm just saying
Right.
you have to be full on, if you want to win, and I would like to address this statement also,
Absolutely.
because this is
Absolutely.
kind of a crawl in every professional musician's side. The the two comments that we all hate is like, oh, so when you're not doing this, what do you really do? That one. And then, of course, the sort of similar thing is, well, why haven't you made it big yet? Or some variant of that, or do you think you'll ever make it big, or that sort of thing? Well, for number one question, this is what I do, first of all, and we that are full time, that's what we do. We don't have to work at Home Depot unless we just choose to do so. If you're fully into the music thing, this is what you do, and it's true. People still do it, even though every time we come up with a way to make a living at it, they make it harder to sell CDs, which now I don't even know they make CDs. I mean,
Right.
it's challenging. So, and so much stuff is free now, but we're still doing it. And then the other part, have you made it big? Well, let's substitute big and successful. Have you been successful? Have you been big? Well, I think when people say, have you made it big, that means that you're on a national level tour with maybe a multi-million-dollar type recording contract, tour buses, road techs, a huge crew, million selling albums, only arenas. It's really hard to make it big when you use the term big with that reference point. Having said that, I know a lot of people that do those gigs, and I can tell you, if you are the artist, you might be getting rich. If you're Taylor Swift, you're making money.
Yep.
Go Taylor. I'm not hating on you. Not
right.
one bit. You're making the money. But if you're hired hand, if you're the guitar player that plays with X, you're not X. So you don't always make the millions like that. Now maybe some do. Some get better deals than others. So I don't know. That's just a little touching point there on that. And I feel pretty successful at this. It's not so much. I mean, I may never play another arena. I'd love to. It's really cool when you look out and you play something and that roar happens that you can only hear that roar when there's about 20,000 of them doing it.
That's right.
It's a great feeling, but being on the road is hard. Essentially, every part of it, other than that set with those people, has challenges. The traveling. I mean, I get really sleep deprived with road gigs. I'm not good at sleep anyway. It's really easy to not get your rest on the road, and you're subject to all kinds of other challenges. What if you get there and the hotel rooms are not secured like you thought they were, and all those sort of crazy things that happens. And you do a lot of waiting. you know. So there's challenges, but it's really, really cool to play the big gigs. But, you know, if you're just kind of what the rest of us are doing all the other time is we're in the trenches. And I make my living from music, and I don't make my living from anything but music. So I used to always say that if I did that, I was successful. So I feel successful with that.
Well, it goes back to define success, and
Well,
it does.
it does. You know, I could tell you a whole bunch of people. I mean, I'm not going to call somebody out, but I could tell you a whole
Right.
bunch of people that I know. They're some of the best musicians and some of my best buddies that they go do some of those big gigs, and then the tour is over, and they
Hmm.
say, "Well, I want to play some music," and they come right back down to Broadway.
Hmm.
And many of them say, "Man, I'm making way more money on Broadway." Many, many, most say that. If they're good, if they get the good slots,
Right.
I know it sounds totally contradictory to what you might think, but I assure you, Scout's honor, it's truth, you know. So, and that doesn't, and I'm not even saying that doesn't mean people are not getting paid okay, you know.
Right. Right.
Um, some people getting great deal, you know. I mean, like I said, if you're the artist, you really get the best, obviously. Um,
Right.
and some artists really look after their musicians if they're hired hands, and some don't, not because they don't care, but just because they're beyond it. They have to have people to do their stuff for them.
Right.
Yeah, you know, their management or whatever. They have to have somebody else to take care of it. They're doing something else, you know. But if you say that your goal is to make your living in music, well, that you could be the person that makes the t-shirts, you know.
Very
it,
true.
there's a lot of music stuff around that you can do. There's a lot here. And you know, one of the things we talked about the other day was that, you know, this is a serious music industry town.
Yes, it is.
It's where all the studio, you know, places are. Like when you say, oh, well, so and so recorded in Blackbird. Well, Blackbird's about 6 minutes from my house. That's where it is. It's the same place that Steven Tyler recorded, or Tim McGraw, or whoever it is. You know, even Rush did some recordings. I think they did. I don't know if they did Blackbird or Ocean Way, but Rush recorded some stuff in Nashville, which is crazy. You think, man, they got to be, you know, up on the snow-capped mountain like they did in those old videos, you know. But
Hmm.
they did some stuff here too, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of industry. If you want to be the person that does distribution of some sort, like merch or, you know, management. I mean, there's all the places like SIR, which is like studio rental and gear rental and all those rehearsal spaces. So if Garth Brooks decides to take another tour, he goes over to SIR and books a big old room. And they set the whole band up with a full show, and they go through the whole thing. You know, and they have to have a place to do it, so they do it there. You know, or whoever. You know, so there's a lot of things you can do in music where you're not playing gigs. For especially good for people who maybe really love the music, really like being around that sort of people, but maybe they just don't play.
Hmm.
Maybe they're sort of, you know, just intense fans that just say, man, I'd love to travel around with the band, or I'd love to work at Sony or something, so if your goal is to make your living in music, there's a lot here. And that's what I'm doing. Maybe that'll change, and you know, I'll get tired later and not do it, but I'm doing it now, and it's been working for a few years, so I just keep doing it.
I still have the quad. I still can't get over the quad.
Yes. What? Well, okay. So let's touch on that. Why not? Because I'm kind of like I nicknamed a friend of mine the ambassador of Nashville. So I'm being the secondary ambassador right now. Dave Swanigan, we love you, my brother. You probably know him.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I used to call him the ambassador because every time somebody would come to town, he'd take them around all these places and tell them everything because he'd been here for years. And um, great dude, great friend of mine. Um, so anyhow, the way that the system works here on your gigs, as far as the Broadway thing is concerned, we call them shifts. Like your gig is a shift, and it's kind of like when you used to say, "Oh, well, Dad's going to shift work" or whatever. It's a little bit like that. The way that works is they block the times off in basically 4-hour blocks, and I believe that the origin of that was they lined it up somewhat like the session workers. So, for example, an artist comes and books time in a studio and says, "Well, we want to record today, and it's going to go from," they book about 4 hours, and after that, it's too much. You're kind of burned out. They'll just have to come on
Mhm.
another day. So they set up 4-hour blocks. And so they kind of set up the Broadway gig scene kind of based on that so that people could do a session and then leave and go play a gig and come back and forth. And so your times are basically 10 to 2, 2 to 6, 6 to 10, and 10 to 2. So if you had the question of, hey, at 10:30 in the morning, are people playing gigs on Broadway? The
Mm.
answer is yes, they are. At 2:15 a.m., are they still playing gigs? Yes, they are. And like I told you when we discussed some of this before, before we did this, yeah, I've got friends that they're playing. If you play one shift, that's one. If you play two, that's a double. Then you can do a triple or a quad. Of course, I feel that if you're doing a triple or a quad, you're just unreal. You're just a mighty, mighty warrior because that is 16 hours of playing back to back. I don't necessarily recommend it, but you know, uh, if you get in the scene and that's what you want to do, you can do it. Our bass player Matt did a quad the other day. He's a
Wow.
astounding bass player, just so good and so easy to play with, and such a cool dude, and just playing all day long. What
Wow.
a beast! What a beast!
I do have a favor to ask of you.
Make it so.
I got to plug in one of my gadgets. Could you explain to the audience about Amanda Daltrey and what type of music she does while I set all that up?
I'll make a go at it.
Go for it. I'm going to step away for just a second. Keep going.
All right.
It's your show now. You get the host for a few
Oh
minutes.
man, get some guests and stuff. I think we are going to beat Paul. I looked up. We're almost at the 3 hour mark. Yeah. Well, yeah. So Amanda, well, yeah. I guess she could be called modern country, maybe. But her style tends to be um, deeply rooted in a whole bunch of things, and so I mean, she could be a very legitimate, gospel singer, a R&B singer. She just has a powerhouse voice, and of course, she's a songwriter. She's written a lot of songs. She's got a CD out from a few years ago, and so you can check that out. And the current band is not on that one, but definitely check it out. And then last year, 2019, right around the time that we went out on the Alan Jackson tour, she released a song called Second Wind. Look it up, Second Wind, Amanda Daughtry. And we're on that one. I'm on that one. And It's a great tune. Check it out. I think you'll like it. Some great singing, and there's an actual video for it if you look it up on YouTube. And that's the most current thing that you would find from her. So it's out there. It's out there. Check it out. I think I timed it perfectly. You got better.
All right, look at this now. Oh my hosting duties are now threatened. I think you'll make a great host.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It just takes about 15 ounces of this Eighth and Roast coffee I get from Eighth Avenue. I've never talked so much in my whole life, probably.
Do you mind if I keep you online for about maybe 20 minutes?
Make a go at it.
All right. So how do you feel about, because you're in a town that may have a lot of these competitions, singing performance competitions. What is your take on that?
Yeah, there is some of that. I would say what we have more of than that. I mean, gosh, I have to admit, when you mention the competition, it is kind of funny because it's like every girl singer I've played with has been part of The Voice, American Idol, or one of those. Every one of them.
Right.
Amanda tried out for The Voice. She did
Right.
that, and in my opinion, she could just stomped it and won it. But I think she bowed out. She wanted to do a lot of different styles, and I think they wanted to kind of pigeonhole her into one thing or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I better not say the story wrong, so we'll have to ask her about it. But and like I said, some of the other people that I've played with and filled in with, it's like, oh yeah, so yeah, they were on The Voice or they were on American Idol. They were, so that tells you a little bit about some of the singers here. There's some really amazing singers around here. It's surprising, no doubt. And you never know, it's like, I think there's like 27,000 20-year-old blonde chicks running around here, sing well, they're everywhere, and like I said, they're legit too. It's not like, oh, well, they're cute, but they're not really, really good. They actually are really good.
Right.
So they're here, but yeah, anyway, that's that. So there is some of that, but I think what you would see more of than competitive type things like the TV shows or whatever, what you see a lot more of it's actually a lot cooler is a lot of writers rounds. So if you're doing the songwriting thing, that's where some of those people can shine, especially the players who say can play the acoustic and do the songwriter thing. Have you ever done a writers round? You might have already. Oh, okay. So you're familiar with that. Well, for those out there who are not, basically you have several people get together and kind of do a little show, and they, it's kind of a VH1 storytellers type mode, and songwriter person one sings a song, and then they sort of go to each one kind of sequentially, and they do that. The last one we did, I do them with Amanda sometimes,
Okay.
She can play the guitar a little bit, but she won't do it. I'm not going to do it because you're in the band. You do it. So we do that sometimes. And the last one we did, maybe it was the last one, maybe not, maybe the second to last one. We did a couple of them. The last ones were, I thought, really good. We did one with Mo Pitney, and I don't know if you're familiar with him. Mo is he's really good. He kind of puts legitimacy into something to like high level. He kind of sounds like an old school. I don't even know what to say. Maybe almost like Hank Williams Sr.
Okay.
He's like, and he's a great bluegrass player. I mean, he can get on the Martin acoustic and play great bluegrass, and he's a great songwriter. And he has those kind of songs, that everybody, once they hit they hit like the first chorus or something, everybody's sobbing, like, oh, So we did one with him and Francelle. She was really good, and there's a lot of up and comers here, and there's a lot of people that have been doing it forever as well. So writers rounds is a great thing here. They don't have that so much on Broadway. You probably heard of like the Bluebird Cafe and
Yes.
world famous, but they have them in a lot of other places too. The Commodore, that's one place that has writer rounds. So I've done some of those. Those are kind of cool. It's a different challenge. You're not doing requests, and you know, you're not cranking up loud. You're usually doing an acoustic, and it's another art form, another category. So there's a lot more of that though than the competitive part. Although there is that too.
Okay.
So yeah.
So, what advice would you give to someone that, wherever they live, USA, any town, USA? I'm going to move to Nashville. I'm going to get famous.
Yeah.
What
Sounds
would
easy, doesn't it?
it does?
Well, um, yeah. There's so much to say about that. There's so much to say. I would say, in the quickest part of that answer, do not overestimate your own importance or skill. You know, I mean, you have to be confident, but I would also say be prepared to have it handed to you. You know, because you're going to get it. You're going to see what it's about. And like I said, a while back, early on here, you're going to see plenty of people that you're going to say, that's not so good. What's everybody talking about?
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of it. Everything is a mixture. Every restaurant is not a 5-star restaurant. Some don't taste good, but some taste really good. And some of the best players in the world are about 5 minutes from here. And actually, my time here is 9 o'clock. There's probably, I don't know, 100 of them in the middle of their set right now. You know, it's going every hour of the day here. So anyway, for someone who aspires to be here, you know, I, I can't stress enough. If you want to do music, this is the place to do it. If you're serious about it, come here and do it. Oh, they're shipping them in by the day. I think there's more people moving here than probably anywhere on earth right now. They're just coming in just truckloads of musicians. And the thing is, we've got truckloads of them already.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, music is not a competition, but if you're going to come and try to play with some of the best players, bring it. Bring it on, bring it strong, bring the best you got, because that's what it's going to take.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll make you a better player. You know, I chuckle sometimes because I know people that have done that thing you're talking about who said, man, I'm going to move up there. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to come in and just show this place how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 2 months later, they live in like, Wisconsin or something. Like, yeah, I couldn't get in over there. So, it happens, We're a friendly bunch, you know. I mean, and the other thing is, be prepared for the country. There's no way around the country. You're going to get into that. However, you will just as soon be expected to play Merle Haggard. You will just as soon be playing Journey and Metallica and Buckcherry and AC/DC and all that other stuff too, And if there was something that I could do, you know, that would make my whole game better,
Mm-hmm.
that I could advise somebody to do, sort of after this long, um, is really get into singing. You know, I'm
Really?
yeah. I mean, I'm just not. I've just never had the heart for it. I sang a little bit years ago. I just I just shun it. Every now and then I think, man, I should just buckle down and just do it anyway. But the reason I say that is your value as a bandmate is incredibly ramped up if you can sing. If you can do some backup singing,
Mm-hmm.
if you could sing maybe, I'll just say if you could lead sing 5 songs, your value went up immensely. Because the way it works, like, okay, here's a scenario. This happens all the time, every week, actually. So we go and play with Amanda. She sings, she's rocking it, she's doing it. And she'll sing for maybe, I don't know, an hour or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then she'll say, hey, I'm going to run the tip jar. And these fellas up here are going to sing. And so then our keyboard player will sing some songs, our bass player will sing some songs. Probably be good if I could sing some songs, but I don't.
All right.
And so when you're trying to get hired on for gigs to play down there, that's going to play into it. Like I said, even if you can just sing 4 or 5 of them, because you'll be able to trade off of one of the other ones and you'll fill in the time when that singer is off the stage. Now, of course, if you could sing 500 songs, your most valuable person on Broadway, that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing. But that's a valuable piece, and especially even if you don't lead sing, if you can do some backups and some harmonies, again, your value is higher. I've certainly had some gigs where they said, "Man, I'd hire you above anybody else if you could sing." Yeah, you know. And of course, I just chuckle and go back to my good gigs and don't worry about it. But it's like I remember a friend of mine. He said, "Man, can you sing like 3 songs?" He said it could be like Mary Jane's Last Dance and like super typical, obvious. And I say, man, I just don't do any of it. He said, man, I've been wanting to get you on a gig, but we got to have somebody to sing just a couple, you know.
Mm.
And of course, I'm lucky in the fact that I have some decent gigs, and I don't sweat it when they say that.
Right.
I'm kind of trying to carry my whole float on my guitar playing. But all I'm saying is, if you come to town and you want to do this thing and you can sing a little bit, it'd be better if you're like, excellent. But if you can sing some songs and do some backups, you'll get the call, and that's important if you're trying to do this. If you don't sing at all, you better be good. You better be the best steel player in Nashville. Or you better be the best fiddle player in Nashville or something, because they've already got it. You know, in other words, if you're that guy, if you say, "Hey, I'm a hot guitar player," well, there's about 10,000 other ones here. There's about 9,800 of them sing like a bird. You know, and so that's the thing. If you don't, you get bumped down. So that's the thing. It's all about your attributes, and just be cool. Be cool with people. Be a good hang. That's kind of an old thing people know, but it's really important here because there's so many musicians here. If you're not a good hang, they'll just never call you because there's so much other stuff to choose. They'll just say, "Well, he's a pretty good guitar player, but he always does this one thing we don't like, and there's this other guy that's just as good, that's that we like a lot." You know, that's a music thing. It's not new. It's not Nashville exclusive by any means, but it plays into it really strongly here because, like I say, so many people want the gigs. You have to find every little trick to say, well, I can do, You know,
Yeah.
like if you're the utility guy, so that's a hard one to find. What if you're the utility guy that says, look, I can sing, I can front the band if I have to. I can sing a whole bunch of songs, like take the request, and I can play steel, dobro, fiddle, mandolin. If you're that guy, you are the hottest dude in town because there's not many of those. You know, if you can cover all that. And if you can get that person, that's probably because they're not on the road with George Strait right now, you know,
Mm.
because they are the rest of the time. That's how it is. So again, it's all about your attributes. If you have strong things that you can do, especially multiple things, go for that. That'll get you far. Because if you think, you know, hey, I'm just going to be the baddest guitar player on the strip, you know, that's cool. I mean, I'm trying to do it too, you know, but you're competing with me and everybody else because they're all trying to do that. Even the ones that sing real well, they still want to be like the smokingest country picking telly guy, you know, on the block. And some of them are really good at it. They're always giving me grief. Just fire it back at them. They're making trouble. So that would be my best tip.
Um, Speaking of genres, and of course, you know the basis of this show for the most part. I always I put a rock spin for the most part. I'm open to all genres,
Mhm.
but I do have a question with the rock element in mind. How does rock music fare in Nashville?
Well, it fares well. And, you know, Amanda said something on the stage the other night, which was kind of funny, but incredibly true. She said, you know, if I remember it correctly, it was something to the effect of, you know, isn't rock music more country than country now, or you know, or something. It was something like that. Anyway, the point is, it's kind of gelled together so much. I mean, you know, if you said, "Oh, well, the rock song typically might be this real heavy crunching guitar," you know, and you figure, what does the rock and roller look like? You know, he's rocking his Les Paul or his PRS or whatever, and he's got, you know, these kind of jeans on, and he's kind of looks like he's in Bon Jovi or something. And all of that, other than maybe less long hair and more ball caps, you know, that's kind of what all the country guys look like. They're all like playing drop D, chunky, sounds like they're playing in Tool or something, but there's, you know, and then they have a little more country twangy, you know, lyrics or something about pickup trucks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, even though there's a lot of guys trying to relive and rehash the kind of the country telly picking thing, you know, there's a lot of people that love that style and they're doing it here. It's really not that in style. You know, really what's more in style is the other thing, is more rocking. And you absolutely uh, it's cool, you know, if you're in Music City and saying, you know, hey, I'm the country expert and I know all the Haggard and I know all, you know, you'll get far with that, but you'll get just as busted if you can't wail on Metallica.
Mm.
You know, it's the coin flips equally. You know, it's kind of like, you know, my thing is always I'm trying to catch up with the Haggard or catch up with the George Strait because I'm not that familiar with it. I've been
Right.
playing rock music all my life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're like the country guy that never played the rock, you get in just as much trouble. They expect you to do it all, you know, and that goes for some of the other elements that are kind of crossing in between, like say the bluesy things, like the Stevie Ray or the, you know, we've done John Mayer tunes and stuff like that. You know, it's kind of like you kind of go, now wait a minute, you know, what is Nashville at this point, you know? And so there's a lot of crossover to it. You can't get around the country, but you can't get around the rock either. You know, you kind of have to honestly, your biggest attribute across the board, putting aside the vocal part, that's a good thing to have, is to be well-rounded. If you're well-rounded, you do well here. If you're like super specific, you'll have a hard time. Because you'll be like the guy that can do that one thing, like really nail it down.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll call the other thing. And you'll be stuck. You know, I've seen it happen. I've been a part of it. I've been a victim, but you gotta, I mean, gosh, I can't tell you how many times we switch gears in our shows. I mean, to give you an example, we played a Buck Cherry song and then played a George Strait song back to back. And that doesn't make a bit of sense, but it's what they wanted to hear at that moment. If somebody requested it, we try to play whatever they request, no matter how ridiculous it might seem.
Wow.
It's hard to do. It's hard to know everything all the time. So that's the challenge. So you'll encounter the country, but you'll encounter all of it too.
I'd like to visit. It's been a while since I've been to Nashville. It's been several years since I've been in that direction. I'll have to, when things kind of, clear.
It's a wild place. There's a lot to see, and there's buildings and corporations and everything brewing up by the second. Just constant stuff going, man. They are really, they build up apartment buildings and stuff every second of every day. I just want to keep my cheap rent.
There you go.
It's hard now. I would say typically the rent is way different than when I first got here. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It's way different. It used to be cheap, but now it's going up fast. Property value and all that is so huge. Everybody wants to build a little restaurant on the side of whatever avenue, and make $1 zillion because it's the hot place to be. But yeah, come on up. It's fun times.
Oh, I got to make those plans because with everything that's been going on, I've been kind of staying put. Out here in California. It's starting to relax just a little bit.
Yeah. And, well, when you get ready, give me a shout.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll connect up.
For sure. Is there anything else that you would like to share? This is your floor now.
Oh, man. I think I got it all out. Thanks for having me.
Geoff, this whole entire interview has been like just a lesson in all ways.
Well, thank you. I hope people are digging it. I hope they have fun with it. I'm looking at the timer. It's long. Maybe I beat Paul. It's a lot to sit through, but break it up. Break it up in a couple different sittings. Whenever I watch stuff, that's like a long situation on YouTube or something like that, I'll watch the first whatever and I'll stop and come back later, so if this is too long, check it all out, take your time, enjoy it. Hey, if anybody gets a nugget of anything good out of it, I'm overjoyed. I spent a whole lot of time doing this, and so I'm trying to, tell you anything I know about it. It's a lifelong quest.
Tone, chasing the tone. I was going back to that tone chasing.
Oh yeah, it's on there. That's the thing, man. I want my recordings to sound like somebody that's been chasing the tone and not sound like a transistor radio. So I'm spending a lot of time on things. Hopefully it's hopefully it'll be smoking hot. When I actually get some other people playing on it, I've got tracks laid down that are kind of like scratch tracks and stuff that I've done myself, like MIDI tracks and loops and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But once I get the real people on it, I've got some good folks that I can get on it. Some of the best we have to offer. So I'm looking to get it done, get it down.
And you got to cook some good barbecue after you get finished.
I'm so starving for that right now. I'm hurting for the cue right now. As soon as I get off, I might have to look at that rib in the refrigerator. Gotta do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Geoff Guthrie. I'm choking up at the throat here. It's been just so wonderful to have you on. Geoff Guthrie, he is a musician in the Nashville area. He's been there for 5-6 years now.
It's been a while.
And he's been at it with the guitar for a long time. And believe me when I tell you this man he has his own sound. He could be playing someone else's music, but it's him. He puts himself into it. So if you're in Nashville and you hear the name Geoff Guthrie or Amanda Daughtry, go.
Yeah, come check it out.
Yes, check it out. Hello, Amanda Daughtry, and maybe one day we'll get to meet. Maybe you'll come on here and I can talk to you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she's a barrel of fun. She's one of my absolute closest friends in the entire world, and just really a stellar human. Glad to play with her all the time.
Well, I'm proud of you. I knew you were exceptional 20 years ago.
Well, thank you.
And I mean this from my heart. I am so proud of you. I am so proud of what you've done.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just hoping to keep pushing on through with it, Making some noise for people to listen to.
And I will definitely let you know when I head out to Nashville. You can show me the town a little bit.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Absolutely. This is the Radio Takeover. You have just beat Mr. Paul Arrowood's record. You currently hold.
There it is.
You hold the longest interview record on this show. You are now at 3 hours and 22 minutes.
Man, good. It's good to go for a goal.
That's right.
Awesome.
So now Paul's gonna want to come back on and do a 4-hour interview. Watch
it. Knock it out. Yeah, I understand. Let's set the bar now. He's got something to work with.
Geoff, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And please come back. Please do.
It was an honor doing it. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. This is the Radio Takeover with Dee Rivers, everyone. Bye-bye.